Okay, first thing I want to do is just thank all of the committee who braved the weather to be here. I appreciate it. I drove 120 miles in the rain, so some of those who traveled further, I'm sure, was no more pleasant. Before we get started, we've got a couple of housekeeping items I want to go through. While I'm doing that, for those of you who have not done so, if your intent is to testify today, please be sure that you have signed in on that form, because I will be calling witnesses in order from that form. If you're going to testify, please fill out a witness statement, because we'll need that for any testimony. Also, for those of you who are in the front row here in the panel, because of the way we're situated, if somebody from behind us wants to speak, it is going to be difficult for them to be seen. So to the extent you can, please be courteous, and let's try to move so that they can be seen by the audience. At each of the meetings, I have done a little preamble just to be sure that everybody's clear about what we're doing here. I think many of you now on the committee know that I think the name of this committee has been working against us somewhat. So this committee is about crime. This is not anti-immigration. It is not anti-illegal immigration. It is about crime that's related to immigration. It is simply a category, much like crime related to human trafficking, or crime related to drugs, or crime related to organized crime. It's simply a category. So I don't want us to misunderstand what we're trying to achieve here. There are those who will choose to believe that this is a setup that we're out to get people who are undocumented. I want to be sure that everyone understands that is not my intention. I would not be here if that were the case. So we know a number of things. We know that quite literally cartels, particularly in our southern neighbors, have commercialized immigration, and in particular illegal immigration. We know that they exert a certain amount of influence over the people that they sponsor to the country. We know that embedded among them are some truly bad people. We know that a significant amount of illegal drugs, particularly our concern is fentanyl, is coming across that border. We have acknowledged in previous meetings that perhaps even more comes across our northern border. I don't know if we know that for certain, because frankly we have not been able to quantify that. But nonetheless, we'll just acknowledge that it comes from both sides of the country. What we don't know is how much crime is perpetrated against undocumented workers. Just because someone is here illegally does not mean that it's okay to victimize them. We have never quantified that because, frankly, those folks don't report crime. So one of our challenges here is to find a way to quantify how much crime is perpetrated against them, and then how much of the collateral effects on our community and our economy are a result of that. So the purpose of this committee is to try to answer those questions if we can. We know that the genesis of this is the southern border. It's just not something that we can fix. So our goal here is to do what we can to mitigate any adverse impacts on the state of Missouri, whatever those impacts are. We don't know the answer to that yet. Please understand that this is a legitimate effort to determine what are those impacts. All right, with that, we will begin hearing testimony. First up is Michael Crawford. And if you're affiliated with somebody, and then begin when you're ready.
My name is William Michael Sharma Crawford. I'm an immigration attorney here in Kansas City, so I'm not really affiliated with anyone in the sense that I have a private practice, and my partner and I run a nonprofit immigration law clinic that represents indigent non-citizens in removal proceedings. And so in conversations with Representative Ani, she asked me to come speak about the subject matter as a subject matter expert. I've practiced immigration law for 22 years. We do complex immigration litigation. I've testified in federal district court, state district court on consequences to both the detention of non-citizens and to the sentence of non-citizens. from an aspect of sentence mitigation. So part of that comes about is that there are significant consequences in criminal consequences to non-citizens. We have a contract with both Missouri Public Defenders and Kansas BIDS, Board of Indigent Services, where we provide advice to lawyers about plea agreements for non-citizens, because the Supreme Court's determined that the immigration consequence of a criminal conviction is a direct consequence to that non-citizen. It is not a collateral consequence. Oops, you got convicted, too bad, by the way, this is going to happen. Because these areas are so interrelated, there are direct consequences, and therefore of a concern to both prosecution and defense. And so part of what I was here speaking with Representative Taylor is, and answering some very specific questions from Representative Taylor, and I'd be glad to field some of those if you have those, but there are a number of statistics you mentioned in your opening remarks. That there's a concern about fentanyl. There's a Cato report that says 89% of all traffickers who are convicted of trafficking fentanyl were United States citizens. And so it's a nice statistic depending on which side of the coin you're on, but it begs some questions, which is to say, where is that statistic coming from? Is that at the border, which would make more sense because fentanyl is expensive and you don't want to put it in a backpack and send it across the river where it's going to get swept away. Drug dealing is a business. However, are we talking about people in the United States and all people who have been convicted of trafficking fentanyl? Does that 11% count non-citizens in the United States who are convicted and prosecuted through the federal system? Again, I don't have an answer for you. I have a statistic which is as malleable as you all want it to be. I can tell you that when you're looking at immigrant crime, the federal government is concerned about that. So you're going to hear, if you haven't, you're going to hear about U visas. And so, from my perspective, let me give you a balance. A U visa is a visa for a victim of crime. There are T visas, who are visas for victims who are trafficked. The way they have that nomenclature is the statute. United States Code 1101A 15, subparagraph U or subparagraph T is where that we begin that analysis. And a U visa isn't the end-all be-all. It takes some steps to get to a U visa. You have to be the victim of a specified crime, not any crime, a specified crime in the statute. Then you have to have a law enforcement officer give you a certification, a piece of paper that says you cooperated with them and you were the victim of that specified crime. That's the beginning. Law enforcement tends to balk at that because they said, well, I don't know if we want to get them a visa. Well, you're not. You're giving them a piece of paper that's one step towards that visa, because the process then requires them to prove that they were injured in some way. And so that process then goes to the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, where it gets analyzed. There are over 130,000 backlog cases for visas. They're taking about 15 years. You're going to spend 5 years waiting, doing nothing until you have a work card. Those are the realities of victims of crime. Trafficking is faster, easier, but it's not easier because the statutory proof is that you have to be in the United States on account of whether you're trafficked for labor or you're trafficked for sex operations, etc. Those are the bare bones. Criminal consequences to non-citizens are huge, because not only are you now going to go to prison, you're now going to be removed from the United States. Whether you're a permanent resident, as we explained to Representative Taylor, or you are here on a student visa, or you are here without documentation. Depending on how you are here, depends on how those consequences are applied and how you are charged with that crime. And we can lean that either way. I can cooperate with the defense counsel and we can find something that allows that person to seek relief, or we can find the state can knuckle down and say, no, we're not going to give this. We're going to insist upon a year sentence in this crime because that has an immigration impact. It becomes a very delicate art form. To give you some other perspective, we're sitting here in Kansas City. Up the road from us is Crown Center, and at Crown Center in the, I always forget the name of it, Armstrong Teasdale building. It used to be Lathrop and Gage, and now it's Armstrong Teasdale. sits in the immigration court. The immigration court sits in Kansas City, Missouri. It covers both Kansas and Missouri. That's its jurisdiction. It covers all immigration cases there. There are 3 immigration judges in that immigration court. There are 48,000 backlog cases currently for the Kansas City Immigration Court. If you land in immigration removal proceedings, then you are not going to see an immigration judge. 2028 is when your case would get heard.
We have a 2 o'clock hard stop.
Okay.
So I'm going to limit testimony to 5 minutes and then inquiries also to 5 minutes. You were in the midst of something. I'll allow you to finish your thought, and then we'll move on to some inquiries.
No, and so to that end, with that statistic in mind of the 48,000, and that number keeps increasing, so that's the last number I had. You have ICE, who has a limited amount of resources. So you're going to hear from law enforcement officers, or you may already have heard from law enforcement officers, that say, we hold somebody for ICE, and then ICE doesn't come and get them. So they have a priority that says, are you worth our effort or not? And that is dictated by a memo. And so in that sense, that's where that conflict arises. So now I've led off saying I can answer your questions. I'll be quiet, and if you have questions, I'll be glad to answer those.
I have a couple before we open it to the committee. I began in police work in 1971, prior to the first amnesty. When that happened, a couple of things occurred, and you're talking about something that brings that to mind. We, as a country, advise people of their Miranda warnings before we ask the questions. But when you advise someone who is new to this country, especially from someplace in the world, even though you advise them of their rights, do they really understand that? Do they actually believe they can tell a police officer no? There was this argument whether or not somebody who had been advised actually understood, which is something we have to ask them. Do you understand? Right. As you were talking about how to go about getting a crime visa, I want to simplify that. It seems to me that most undocumented would not understand that. And they don't report initially for the most part anyway. So how do we address that?
I think twofold. I started law enforcement in 1985, and at that point, immigration was only concentrating on criminal aliens, so you began this people who didn't commit crimes, and they didn't want to cooperate with us. If you were ever on patrol and had to take a report or had to stop the house, they dealt with you as short as possible and asked you to leave. 2 pieces. U visa is becoming more and more common, and so more non-citizens know about it and may not inquire. I think the first piece is to ensure that the communities that you all serve understand that the agencies that are in those communities are willing to listen to victims. Because a lot of what we see are, well, this police department will never sign a 918B, which is the form. And so that community then begins to shrink, shut down, and not talk. I think if you're going to say Missouri wants victims to be heard, then that needs to trickle down, and law enforcement needs to understand that it's not political to issue a 918B, that it is part of what they, if indeed that person deserves it. If you're someone who's not cooperating with you, not doing this, then that's understandable. There are balances. And I think that we're overcoming the language barrier that I'm sure you and I both struggled with as we were working on the street, where we have more and more officers that speak different languages, not just Spanish, Hindi, and Punjabi, and Mandarin, and all of the other things we need to deal with. So I think that continuation of that language, whether it's a written piece of paper or not, would go a great way to solve it.
We commit for their questions. I do want to make a parting observation, and I will tell you up front, everyone on the committee will agree with me, but it's something that I believe to be true. Whether someone is here legally or illegally, if there is a crime perpetrated against them, there's a collateral influence on the community, even whether they're not the victim. It tends to follow the enterprise of illegal immigration. We know that it's been commercialized to some extent. So there's more to this than just how we identify how many victims are not documented. What's the input to our communities, to our economy, to our hospitals, to our institutions of learning that are collateral to that. With that, Taylor.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning, Mr. Attorney Crawford. You were telling us about the crime visas, and just one step above that, is this part of the, I'm sorry, my own word, not amnesty, but asylum? Is this part of the asylum process?
No, the asylum process is a separate statutory process by which people seek asylum in the United States. When I was growing up, it was the Cuban baseball team would come to the United States to play in the Olympics, and then they'd all stay in the United States. So, I mean, asylum is a multifaceted, very complex area in the sense that it causes a lot of hot-button issues. Entry into the United States, the narratives that people bring tend to polarize a lot of people. The U visa is you have statutory process codified with the Immigration and Nationality Act 208. And in the definitional section for 1101, as I was describing, or Immigration and Nationality Act 101, you have the definition for those visas. Then you have the regulatory process that causes that to be enacted by the agency. So the asylum process is a completely separate piece. You can have someone here seeking asylum who is working late nights at a grocery store because they got to work off the asylum application, and now there's the subject of a robbery because they're at an easily targeted convenience store. Now they're eligible for a U visa. Can they pursue that end? Absolutely. So they interrelate in that way, but otherwise they're distinct.
You and I started talking about the asylum process. Share with me a little bit more about the very beginning and the requirements that someone actually has to be in the U.S. before they apply. What is the process and how does it start?
So two words you're going to hear, refugee and asylee. A refugee is someone who is outside the United States seeking to come in, and an asylum seeker or an asylee is someone who's in the United States, so they have to make entry. The statute allows them to make entry at any point along the border. They don't have to come to a gate and ask. The statute's clear that you can enter the United States at any point and then seek asylum. How we then process this is a whole series. That's the question that's going on at the border. How do we make them? You will hear people say we want to have them heard in 90 days if they're caught, or they have 1 year. Typically, they have 1 year within their arrival in the United States to file for asylum. You will see, as an example, I assist Uyghur students and Uyghur professors. It just became a thing. So now I get phone calls from most students who are seeking asylum from China because of persecution of the Uyghurs. And so they don't have a 1 year requirement because they're already in status. But then we work on their applications, get them filed, and they'll get processed as things. So they're seeking protection because of the persecution that's already in China. A lot of what you see are Haitians, Venezuelans, Cubans, in Central America are all pushing their way on that land bridge in the United States. And they have the right to seek asylum because we have the Convention Against Torture treaties, several international treaties we're a part of.
And they seek asylum, they filed for asylum. Are they allowed to work in the U.S.?
They're allowed to. So there have been some changes once the asylum application has been pending for more than 150 days without any action by the government. So they didn't set for a hearing, they didn't set for an interview. It's just been pending. Then what's known as the asylum clock is satisfied, and they can then file for work authorization. Currently, the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services is issuing work cards for 5 years. So they'll have a 5-year work card. Considering the backlog on affirmative asylum applications, meaning those applications where you didn't get caught by immigration, the Uyghur students as an example, here for purpose and then say, by the way, I can't go back. There's a backlog on those interviews of several years. So you may get more than one work card while you're waiting for that application to pin. Defensive asylum applications, I've been return because I'm going to be persecuted, those get processed through the immigration courts. That timeline is going to differ whether or not you're in custody or you're not in custody. Again, here, if you're not in custody, you're looking at a hearing of 2028 for your trial. You have some what we call a master calendar or a docketing hearing interspersed there, but your trial is probably going to be 2028 as of if you started today.
And I don't want to, in essence, someone may have crossed the border illegally. They could apply for asylum. They're waiting for asylum. They can, after a certain period of time, they can apply for a work permit, and they could work here while they are waiting for their asylum trial case or hearing.
That is correct.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Murphy.
Thank you. A couple of things. You say that the immigration court in Kansas City holds both Missouri and Kansas City. Is that correct?
That's correct. All of Missouri, all of Kansas. Yes, sir.
How many courts are there in the country?
250?
50?
250, 240, somewhere. Yeah.
With 48,000 cases at 250, that hardly accounts for the 20 million people who have come across the border. Either here waiting on a hearing or just crossed illegally and never got to the system.
The 48,000 is Kansas City alone.
Right.
So that's 48,000 pending cases in Kansas City at the Kansas City Immigration Court. There are over.
But you said they handle both states.
They do. So Kansas and Missouri have 48,000 pending cases. There are. That's what's backlogged in Kansas and Missouri.
Okay.
I can give you I don't have numbers for a population of immigrants in either Kansas and Missouri, so I can't give you that breakdown. What I can say is that there are a number of programs that exist to pull people out of courts because with 3 judges, you're over 15,000 per judge, and you're not going to hear those cases. So there are ways to deplete
labor because we're going to move on. Work authorization.
Yes, sir.
After 150 days, they can apply for work authorization. Is that correct?
If they filed their asylum application within 1 year of arrival, timely, and no action has been taken on it, for asylum purposes, they can then file. There are other ways to get work authorization. A work authorization document is an ancillary document to an application for form of relief, whether you're filing for your spouse or there are other ways to get it. But yes, that's correct for asylum.
In the last 8 years, or the last 4 years under the Biden administration, it's been either the numbers vary from 8 to 12 million people have come across our border. Would it surprise you to know that only 700,000 have applied for work authorization?
It would insist that I think that number is low because of the broad spread of work authorization documents available to everyone. So you can come across the border. The current numbers for the Biden administration indicate more removals than any other predecessor, including Obama, who was good at removing people. And so there are a number of removals across as well. There is a rigid, credible fear process at the border that screens folks out. I don't have that number for the 700,000, but considering you have.
Well, why do you think that that number that's here, we're not looking to apply for work authorization?
So, to a number of steps. One, finding representation is difficult. So they go through notarios and other people to get that. Some come younger and don't have knowledge or language skills. Some speak very rare dialects, move into small communities and don't seek any outside assistance. So they do nothing. They go to their court hearing, they get ordered to remove, and they continue to work. They are working under the table at farms, ranches, restaurants, whatever.
Do you think that's a problem for our economy when they work for the table?
Well, I think the economy wants that. We haven't done anything about it.
I think we have unions here that will tell us that's not.
No, I think the unions would love to be able to tap into undocumented workers.
Couldn't they do that if they applied for a work authorization?
Yes, if they could. If they had a work card, then the union could hire them. There's a really unique viewpoint that says the statute that prevents and I from hiring undocumented folks doesn't prevent the state or a state from hiring undocumented folks, but that's a really long, twisted legal theory. But then I suppose Missouri could hire people and farm them out to Kansas, but I digress. The idea is that many people don't have money, don't have the economics. They're coming to live with family. They're coming to investments. They don't know what to do, and the process is daunting. Is the easiest word I have, and it's probably not strong enough.
So for an illegal that came across the border and they waited there 150 days, you're saying that the process at that point is so cumbersome that they wouldn't.
They have to file the asylum application first. So you have someone who's undocumented in the United States. They have a brief encounter with Customs and Border Protection, and they're given a whole raft of documents. In that document is what's one known as a notice to appear. At the bottom of the notice to appear is a date, and that date, at least for here, is 2027. That's your court date. So most people don't do anything until their court date comes up, because that's when they have to do it. And that causes them to miss the deadline for the one-year asylum application, and now the work card.
Thank you. Oh, there it is. Thank you for being here today. I really appreciate your time and your expertise. I know that this committee has had, over the last several times we've met, had questions regarding to federal immigration policy and how that impacts folks who are trying to live and work in our state and in the communities that we represent. So this is really useful insight. I'm curious about you've had an interesting career in my opinion, starting in law enforcement, now working in the as an attorney in the immigration arena. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you've seen here in Missouri change over time, over the last several decades, just in terms of immigration trends, economic trends, how those intersect with kind of our communities? Like, what are you seeing? Are any trends that stick out to you? Anything that's changed? And do you see a tie back to the federal immigration policy, or I suppose lack thereof?
You have a large population of people who want to be able to work, they want to be able to travel, and they want to be able to I mean, that's really the two big pieces, because they come for the economic exchange, the dollar to the quetzal or the rupee or the whatever home country is. So they come here to earn dollars. They don't understand the complexity of living in the United States, the economic burden of living in the United States, and so that confusion still exists, in the sense that somebody coming new doesn't understand how expensive it is and doesn't realize what happens. You have a number of industries that need to be put with those people, and that gap is growing, in the sense that in the 7 years I've represented ranchers in western Kansas, they're still seeking solid workforce for them to draw from. And I think that's the tension that's always going to go. If you ever listen to Marketplace on NPR, Kyle says immigration is an economic issue, and it is. That continues to be the economic face. What's changed is a bit of sophistication among non-citizens, the rise of DACA, the recognition of the dreamers, if you will, to say that we now have an Americanized, educated immigrant population that is stagnant. And you can go wherever you want to, anywhere, and meet that community and not recognize them. One of the first DACA applications ever completed was for a young man wearing a Nirvana t-shirt. And it wasn't because that's where he got it from. That's the music he liked. There's nothing really more American than grunge rock. So, I mean, that's the population that we've forgotten, and we continue to forget. So you have this idle population that is growing because those kids are still arriving, and they're still acclimating. I mean, when you have a child who arrives at 5 or 6, 10 years ago, that child's 15. That child's a high school participant, and they are Americanized. And the problem is without a proper filter for the parents to achieve the work-travel balance, that child is trapped, because when you get to a certain point, either the parents have ignored the one-year deadline and didn't file and didn't go to court, and they were part of a family group, so they didn't get to work hard, and they didn't do anything, and that child now has a removal order that we have to go back and undo, or you have that kind of thing. And so as that population, if you will, that sister population that creates value and is invisible because they are so acclimated to the United States, that population is growing. And that's the pressure that I think you're going to see both here in Missouri, across the country.
What would you say the biggest challenges are facing immigrant communities in our state right now? We've touched on things like the economic aspect, the criminal aspect, whether they're being committing crimes or being victim of crimes, whether they're working legally or not, whether they're, what are the biggest challenges you see facing folks who are here illegally?
Truth. And by that I mean there is so much information. When we began to practice, we had the radio, and the radio that would play at construction sites and kitchens, wherever. That was where people came and spoke and said, this is what the immigration policy is. Now it's TikTok and Instagram and all of this, and all of that unfiltered information that confuses Americans about everything else, confuses immigrants about what they have to do. The immigrant that has the 2027 court date on the bottom of their notice to appear has no way to find clean information that says, wait, you have something to do before that 2027 court date. And if you fail to do that, you're just out of luck. And that level of clear communication for that population is either you hire counsel and go see them, or you take whoever's advice on the internet, and that becomes a scary process.
Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Thank you so much for being here.
Certainly.
So this is our fourth hearing across the state, and I have a few questions for you.
Sure.
They're going to be a little bit all over the place as well.
No worries.
But you said you were in law enforcement?
Yes, ma'am. 15 years.
How many, 15 years?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Thank you. And I think we have some people from law enforcement here as well. I'm not for sure right now. But we've been hearing from law enforcement the past 4 hearings. And what they continue to say to us is this is a federal issue. And the state can't really do anything. And if the state wants to do anything, they can help with their budget. They need more staff, like everybody else. They need more funds for technology. They need the state to kind of not make their job harder. So I'm kind of wondering, it's been 15 years, and I don't know how long it was before, but I was just kind of wondering, do you feel the same? And also, do you have anything else to add that maybe we can do to help?
So let's start by dividing things. You have state law enforcement who is enforcing state statute and the Missouri Constitution. You have an undocumented non-citizen who, if they committed a crime, that was a misdemeanor, that they entered the United States without permission across the border, the river, or whatever that typical scenario looks like. So all of this that we talk about, all of this process that we're discussing, whether it's the asylum application or the naturalization, whatever, that's civil. It is a federal civil process. So when we use the word illegal, what we're saying is that that person is acting contrary to law, but not that they're a criminal. But the immigration process uses arrest, warrant, jail, bail, bond, all of these court, all of these terminologies that sound criminal, but are not. So you get this confluence that says, well, they are illegal. No, they're acting contrary to law, they're a federal civil problem. So law enforcement gets put in a bond where you have someone who says you should do something about them because they broke the law. And law enforcement has to say, well, I don't have anyone to do that. I can't enforce. They haven't triggered the Missouri Constitution or Missouri statute. When they do, I'll act that way. But whether they're going to go out and hire, you have a 5-man department in rural Missouri, none of them speak Spanish, they need a budget to be able to tap into Lion Bridge, to speak Ukrainian or Mixtec or Aguateco or French for that matter, because you're dealing with Creole Haitians. That's an expense they may or may not have. An educational understanding in what those balances are. Those are resources that law enforcement is going to need. There was that whole discussion on defund the police, which is a really stupid way to talk about looking at what law enforcement does or does not do, or should not be doing. In that sense, I think the aspect is to back out and let law enforcement do exactly what they're supposed to do, which is enforce the laws of the state of Missouri, the Constitution of Missouri, and then when someone violates them, then they're there. Is there an immigration consequence? Yes. Then they have to deal with us. They have to call Mr. Teschner up here in Kansas City, and his people will make a decision to see whether or not that person falls within a priority for them to act on. If not, then it should end there. And the difficulty is having that clean of a conversation in a very heated environment to make everybody understand that.
The other question I have, help me with work visas, just a little bit of understanding. So let's say I'm here on a work visa.
Okay, hang on. Terminology is very important.
Yes.
So a visa is a document issued outside the United States to come into the United States. A work authorization document is a work card issued within the United States to allow someone here to work. You can be here on a work visa. H-2B is people that mow lawns. H-1B is the atypical computer programmer. So that's a work visa document they got outside to come here to work. A work card that we were discussing with Representative Murphy is a document that's an ancillary permission from an application. So if they are here with a work card, if that's what you meant, then we can continue.
Okay, yeah, no, sure. So I guess my question is, okay, let's say they're here with the work card.
Yes.
So they're working, they're paying taxes.
Yes.
But what are the benefits that they may or may not get? Like, let's say Medicaid, Medicare.
Depending on their status in the United States, they may or may not have access to that.
Okay.
They will have been issued a Social Security number, so they will be paying into Social Security because they now have a proper documentation, proper Social Security number. They're listed in the system as being an applicant. If they go to court and they lose their case and they are removed or they agree to leave the United States, they will never see those benefits because they will never be eligible to touch them. There gets to be a confusion about means to public assistance, SNAP, I believe the phrase is. That may be eligible to their children who are born in the United States who are citizens, but not to them.
All right, thank you.
Apparently, when we get close, it echoes pretty badly. So we're asking if you could sit back just a little bit and speak a bit more loudly. We have 10 additional witnesses that we need to hear yet today, and we've invested 40 minutes on our first witness. So to avoid having the further limit our time period, I would just ask that if we're going to make an inquiry that it's new information, if your inquiry starts out with, I'm just curious, I would suggest that might not be the best inquiry. So with that, Representative Boynton.
Come a trial in one crime, but you do it 2 times, right? The trying for that, you try the border illegally. What the trying for that?
It depends on the background. So at the border, you are apprehended by Customs and Border Protection. They will take your fingerprint. So if you talk to Customs and you hold up an index, this is an ident print. They usually use the index finger. They'll run that and then see what's in the database. Depending on where they are in the border, they may or may not be subject to prosecution in a federal court because there's a program to prosecute them. Most of them are overwhelmed and not doing a lot of prosecution unless there are a lot of repeat offenders. So each time you enter the United States without permission, that's a misdemeanor. If you enter the United States after you've been deported from the United States and you re-enter without permission, that's a federal felony.
Okay, so another thing too, I just wondering, how many people, more people that come here do not work? Because the majority of people, I think you said 700,000.
So they work. It's about whether or not they're obtaining the work authorization document. I think there's a what Representative Murphy was trying to illuminate is a disparity between an actual population base and the number of people that have work authorization documents. You need to put words in your mouth, Representative.
So, if somebody's coming illegally and they go to a hospital, do the hospital have to treat them?
That would be up to the hospital's own
Well, I
rules,
can
but I would
ask
imagine
you
they
to
would.
treat them, but they do. By law, they
Yeah.
have to treat them. And who pay for that?
That would depend on the abilities of the person.
Well, in all, we pay for that until I go to hospital.
I don't have those statistics.
No, I'm just telling you
Sure.
that's what happened. The people in the United States pay for that. Until when they come in and go to junior high, until that, they can always go to junior high, senior high. And so who pays for that? I mean, we pay for that, right?
Well, that's a different story because non-citizens can own property, and many of them do aspire to buy a house. So the minute they bought the property, now they're paying taxes, which then does the school. So that argument may not have as strong legs as any other because they do buy property and can buy property. I understand there's a whole Missouri debate about Chinese.
So
but I
the
don't
chance
think
of buying property, if a very small percent who buy property at the beginning, they normally rent property. So any people who want to buy property, I got said that want to buy property too high.
Yeah.
You tell me that majority of the people illegally buy property? I don't think so.
a lot of my clients, and I can only speak to that perspective, are here with family, and that family at some point in that scenario, whether you have mom and dad here and then an elder child came and then brought whatever, that parental unit that's been established here has a house they own.
Wow, they do a lot better than people here legally then. So a lot of people illegally can't afford to buy one.
But a lot of people don't want to live in those neighborhoods because they're going to buy a $14,000 house and fix it up.
Okay, well, all right, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Lee.
I can't see, so. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is more of a curious question, so you have time constraint, so I will ask it nonetheless. Okay.
I can hear you.
My question is simply, there we go. Can you talk to us about the decrease in crime, especially here in Missouri? And is that, to your knowledge, a fact that there over the years, say within the past 3 to 5 years?
I don't have any statistics on decrease or increase of crime, whether statewide or national-wide. I'm sorry, I don't have that statistic.
Okay, well then, my second question then would be, could you elaborate on a little bit more when you were talking about that time restraint and about the public not knowing that once they have that court date, like 2027, right? Is there anything that we can possibly do to change that narrative as far as them thinking that they have time to fill out the information once it's 2027, and then at that time the year has passed and they're no longer eligible for asylum?
I mean, it would depend on how much you want to get into that debate. If you want to say that this is of importance to the state of Missouri, then yes, PSAs in the community, working with the Hispanic Chamber, the Casey for Refugees, all of those groups to say, please make sure that your population is filing those applications when necessary so that we get as many people lined up for work authorization as possible, then yes, that message is easy to put out. Because ideally, it should come from ICE when handing them this whole ream of paper with a big piece of paper that says you have to file within 1 year. That piece of paper doesn't exist. That notice doesn't exist. Whether you chose to put that information out through the affected community organizations, Guadalupe Center, El Centro, et cetera, then yes, that could be done. I mean, that's just something you could say, here, please put this message. Here's the state of Missouri saying we want you to be productive members of the community for the time that you're going to be here, whether that's permanent or not. Then please work through those steps because it's in our interest. It's entirely possible, yes.
I think everywhere where we are not taking questions from the audience. I apologize, we just don't have the time. Further questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Our next witness is Judith. If you would state your name for the record, be sure you fill out your witness form and proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, sir.
Please remember we have 5 minutes.
I'm sorry, what?
Please remember that we have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Judith Ansell. I am president of a Missouri nonprofit called Cross Border Network, and I have a written statement which I have turned in, and I won't have time to read all of it. So I want to tell you a little bit about the experience of my organization, because I think there are many misconceptions about who the immigrants are who are here. And I particularly want to focus on our immigrants from Latin America. My organization was founded in 1998 in response to NAFTA and the anger it provoked, especially among blue-collar Missourians who saw factory after factory close and move to Mexico. You may recall that Missouri lost its entire shoe industry and its clothing industries at that time. Springfield lost its huge Zenith plant, and St. Joe and St. Louis were particularly hard hit with factory closing and jobs moving over, particularly to Mexico, but also to other countries. Now, the jobs that disappeared became bad jobs in Mexico. Jobs that paid wages of hunger, jobs that were unsafe, but jobs that were working for the same corporations that left here. What pushed us to form the Cross Border Network was that so many here blamed Mexicans for stealing their jobs, without understanding that the people who took those jobs were very often displaced farming people who had lost their jobs as a result of NAFTA as well, because of the influx of corn into Mexico, corn exports, and the closing also of factories in Mexico that could not compete. So we began doing exchanges, taking Missourians down to Nuevo Laredo, Reynosa, Matamoros, and bringing workers here so that they could see that the streets weren't all paved with gold here either. One thing we learned quickly was that by bankrupting Mexican campesinos and then paying them a pittance in the new transplanted factories, NAFTA had become a magnet for migration. We met women factory workers whose sons and husbands were fixing roofs in Houston or working in meatpacking plants in Dodge City, and sending money home to subsidize the low wages paid by General Motors, Emerson Electric, General Electric, and so on. Unable to survive in Mexico, so many reluctantly pulled up stakes, uprooted themselves, and came to the United States. We had to stop working in Mexico with people on the border when Mexican society disintegrated to the point that the drug cartels took over. Then, after 2009 and the coup in Honduras, which many believe was authorized by the United States, we began working there and watched as the post-coup government became a narco-dictatorship and extreme poverty swelled. The maquilas paid even lower wages than Mexico, and gangs like MS-13 worked in cahoots with corrupt cops, the military, and the narco dictator. Juan Orlando Hernandez, who took over. So what would you do if some oligarch illegally took your land, which provided you subsistence, or the gangs demanded you turn over your daughter to them? How much violence and corruption would you be willing to suffer before you uproot your family and walk 2,500 miles hoping to find safety in the United States? Thousands of people in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras have made and are continuing to face that awful decision. These are people who are hard workers, they're family-oriented, and they hope to find some place where they can live to see their kids grow up. Yet, this committee, by the implication of its title, calls them criminals. In fact, they are fleeing criminals, which are often their government. You might note that the ex-dictator of Honduras was just convicted in court of drug trafficking and weapons charges and sentenced to 45 years in prison. That's who ruled Honduras, and that's who we helped put in power. So, over the last 25 years, what the Cross-Border Network learned about immigration is that the vast majority of people leave because they can't stay. We also learned about the very close connection between a disastrous U.S. trade and foreign policy, which is bipartisan, and the dislocation of tens of thousands. And it's not just true for Mexico and Honduras, it's true for Haiti, Guatemala, El Salvador, and even Venezuela and Colombia.
Your time is up.
All right, can I just say one more thing? Which is, I do have a number of suggestions for what you can do to encourage our immigrants to report crimes.
We
They're
may
in-
be able to have
in
some
my
discussion
testimony.
about
What?
that as we do. We may have some discussion about that as we do inquiries, but I need to kind of keep us on time.
All right,
I absolutely agree with you that NAFTA was a disaster from the very beginning. It was just a goofy idea. So, while I don't dispute anything that you're saying of why people come to this country, you ask what I do if I was faced with that. I might immigrate, but I would do it legally. The challenge that we're having is that so many people who come to the country illegally doesn't allow us the ability to know who they are. Our previous witness talked about the number of people who have these 5-year work documents. How do we vet them? How do we know who those people are, especially if they're coming across the border and never see a U.S. official? Part of our challenge that we're trying to get a handle on is how many people come here that we absolutely have no idea about. How many of them are there? And what influence do they have on our crime? I'm not disputing anything that you say. I agree that NAFTA was a disaster and it's caused all kinds
it's not
of...
just NAFTA, it's our foreign policy.
Well,
Okay,
that too, fortunately, the president has never asked me my opinion about that.
No.
Can I sure share it?
Can I respond to that?
Please.
Okay. Well, our immigration laws are broken, for sure. I think we probably can all agree about that. You know, one thing you can do, because you're only state representatives, you don't represent us in the federal government, is you can encourage our federal officials, our congressmen and our senators, to work in a bipartisan manner to get comprehensive immigration reform so that people who are in need of asylum can find a way to do it without walking across the border or waiting for months, if not years, in dangerous camps in Mexico. Because that's our system now. It makes our system encourages people to cross illegally. And yes, they may turn themselves into the Border Patrol, but you've just heard how long it is to wait, how hard it is. You need to have several $1,000s just to file for asylum, but you're not permitted to work. All of that is broken.
I agree with you. Representative Taylor.
Thank you, and Ms. Mansell for joining us. And I wanted to give you a moment to please do share some of your recommendations, and if you can highlight some of the things that we at the state level can address. If you could repeat some of those and share your recommendations, please.
Sure, thank you. I have a list. First off, change the rhetoric so that people aren't scared because they've been demonized. The media has been spreading all kinds of lies about immigrants. You can speak out against that, and you can say, no, these aren't true. They are not criminals. You know, they are not illegals. Second, support policies throughout the state, in every county and city, that would help immigrants feel safe enough to come forward and report crimes and testify against criminals in court. Those policies would ensure local police and sheriffs do not report people to ICE if they come forward. The 287G agreements, the various cooperative agreements between our local police and immigration enforcement are a huge deterrent from people coming forward to report. They're scared. Second, or third, pass laws, which many other states have done, to facilitate processing of one of the most common crimes against immigrants, which is wage theft and misclassification, which of course hurts the worker who's robbed of his pay, and also the government, which doesn't get the tax payment. I think probably the greatest crime right now against immigrants is economic crimes of wage theft, of failure to pay overtime, of unsafe jobs. And the state can definitely do something about that. You could make it much easier for people to collect by passing laws which would help them do that. Another one is permit immigrants to get driver's licenses in the state of Missouri, because they get arrested for not having driver's licenses. And, you know, that's ridiculous. Stop discriminating against our immigrant students whose hardworking, tax-paying parents want to send their kids to college, but public universities charge them out-of-state tuition.
Do that right there for a moment. Only because we heard something very similar in our last hearing. And I personally have to accentuate that it is at great personal and family and community sacrifice that these individuals are here studying to make themselves better and to grow our community. So I 100% agree that we do need to do something educational-wise or just universally that recognize the great sacrifices that people are making, and students and very young people, when they come to this country to learn. So I apologize. I'm going to ask you to be quick with your remaining list of my time. Thank you.
Okay. There are probably a few other things that would help, but do all you can to welcome immigrants, even those who are not authorized to be here, in our communities, because when people feel welcomed, they participate, including reporting crimes. These are people who are a tremendous value to our community. They pay taxes. Missouri would, if everybody got deported, like some folks are recommending, it would cause an economic crisis in this state because of not just the economic contribution that our immigrants pay, both undocumented and documented, but also the taxes that they're paying to Missouri. Look up the statistics. They're quite substantial.
Well, I encourage you. I know that you have a written bio.
Submitted it.
If you would submit that. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us today.
Representative Murphy.
I'm confused. You know, if being legal means being contrary to law, they're all legal because they're here contrary to law. I agree. 99% of the people that are coming across our border don't come here to be criminals. They come here because they're looking for a better life. And I think that's the promise of America. But as you know, and I know, we have immigration laws that need to be respected. And frankly, I think the defense of the amount of people coming across our border is disrespecting this country and its laws. And I think that, I get it. These people are here, and they are definitely people that we need and should welcome. But we need to do it in a legal manner, not coming across the border. Secondly, when you say they're paying taxes, well, yeah, they're paying some taxes. They're also stealing jobs. They are stealing jobs because they are working under the table. They are stealing jobs because they're working under the table at rates that are well below market rates, please. And this is not acceptable. We need to fix that. Now, do we fix it by saying these people are bad? No. But we need to fix our laws to allow them to get those work permits, because 700,000 out of 20 million is not enough. You should be working to get those people work permits so they can work legally in this country, and then they can pay taxes. Then they can for the federal.
Can I respond? Can I respond to that, sir?
I am not going to allow disruption from the audience. You are certainly free up here on the committee to ask a question. But if you're going to be disrupted from the audience, I will have you removed. This committee, by its very name, as you pointed out, makes it subject to some presumptions that are not entirely true. I understand it's emotional, but we're going to run this in a dignified manner. If there's any more disruptions from the audience, I will have that person removed. Okay, proceed.
Okay.
It's not their fault. It's the employers that are hiring them and doing it in an illegal manner. It's not the worker's fault. But if you have a contractor who is hiring people and paying them under the table, and a contractor that is paying union wages or standard wages, they're going to lose jobs on that. And that's not right, and that's illegal. And I'm not going to pretend to you that I hold the immigrant responsible for that. But our system is broken, and we have to have that conversation. We can't just make it sound like, well, this committee's here, and by its nature is saying bad things about illegal. We're not. What we're saying is we have a system that's broken, and it's broken on the federal level, but there are things we can do in the state level to make sure that we do things in a proper manner. Because I will tell you, when a worker is paid under the table, they're being abused. They are being abused. They don't have workers' compensation, they don't have insurance, they don't have a proper wage, and frankly, they're overworked, and that's just wrong. We can't not have that conversation. And if you're going to damn this committee, if you're trying to have a conversation that's good for everything, everybody, then we're never going to get to where we need to be. We need to welcome these people. We need to welcome them in a proper manner. And that's all there is to it. So, let's stop this back and forth. Well, because the committee is here, that we're labeling them as terrible people. We're not. We're saying that them being here and the way that they are here is detrimental to this country because it's not done properly. And we need to find ways to make it happen.
Well, I can certainly agree with you on that, sir. And I appreciate that. Let me just give you an example. I just had a case. I do investigations of wage theft. I'm a labor educator, and I know what the laws are. And I just had a case a couple of weeks ago. A guy called me, immigrant from Colombia. He's working illegally and was working on a tax-subsidized project here in Kansas City. And they hired him and worked him 17 hours a day, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. Paid him no overtime, did not deduct taxes. That would have been a bunch of taxes. And, gave him a check with a lump sum and no pay stub. And that's real common. But, when you go to the city of Kansas City, they don't have any enforcement for that. The amount of enforcement that is funded either at the state level or at the city level is paltry. But wage theft of that type is occurring all over the place.
Representative Host, then Representative Engel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry I can't see you. my view, but a couple things that I agreed with you on is that I do believe that people that are coming here to try to have a better life are being taken advantage of by the people that are assisting them to get here. I hate to use the word slave, but many of them are working in poor conditions and are not on the books. And I think that sometimes we say the reason they don't want to report crime, people are here trying to make a better life for themselves, is because they're afraid of being deported back to the country they come from. But I also know from the previous hearings that we've had that there are people that they're more fearful of being hurt or killed by the people that's managing them or enslaving them to work in these jobs. And so the things that we want to try to do with this committee is to find ways of how we can prevent that or make it maybe a criminal type activity to be doing that, which I think it already is. But a couple things I want to ask you here, and I'll try to be within my timeline here, is I think that the federal government has the laws on the books right now to stop people coming here illegally and not through the correct system. Do you believe that those laws are being enforced currently by this federal administration, or do you think that they are looking the other way for various reasons?
We spend more money on the Border Patrol and ICE than we do on any other form of policing in this country. It's an enormous amount of money, and it's also a huge challenge. We don't have an orderly process whereby we can admit people and screen people. And so it becomes a question of law enforcement, and no matter how much money we keep throwing at it, it doesn't seem to work. As I said initially, the problem originates in the countries from which people are coming. And those problems are a lot the result of U.S. policies. Not entirely. There's a lot of bad actors out there. But the fact is, the incredible poverty and corruption and violence we're seeing in Central America in particular are very much a result of over 100 years of U.S. imperialism.
Actually touched on something there that I wanted to address, because I was reached out to by some citizens from my district saying that if things are so terrible in these countries, why do these people there want to make a better life for themselves? He says, why do they not rise up and overthrow those governments? Have you been able to talk to anybody that's in those areas? Should the U.S. help overthrow those illegal governments? I'm just asking for your opinion on that.
Well, the U.S. supports the dictators. I don't care whether it was Hernandez in Honduras or whether it was a whole series of people in Guatemala or El Salvador. Read the history of the 1980s.
Okay, so the second point I have on that is that this happened in the Cuban boat crisis, where Castro was emptying his prisons and people that were in mental institutions and flooding them into the U.S. because then they didn't have to take care of them anymore. Have people that you've talked to or dealt with, have they reported to you that they're possibly criminals or people that's being released from prisons knowing that they will be sent out of that country to the U.S.? Any comments on that from people you've worked with?
No, but I have met people who were political prisoners who somehow got out and came here seeking asylum.
Yeah, dissidents, I agree with you on that.
No, I have not heard. I have met a number of Cubans who have come here, and I don't think any of them were people who had been in prison.
So this is one of the questions I've had for others and some other hearings we've had, but with your organization that provides assistance to people that are here trying to become legal citizens, when you become aware of someone who is here illegally, they've not showed up for their hearing because of various reasons, do you report those individuals to law enforcement to make them aware of that?
No.
What if, what if they were
most
felons?
people who are here undocumented who have not been able to file for asylum is because they don't have the money to pay. It's really expensive to get an immigration attorney.
We're talking about the civil aspect of that, but let's just say that someone who's here illegally would report to you that they are being enslaved and working, or they've been a victim of a crime, and the person that's doing that to them is also here illegally. Would you report that to law enforcement, or do you guys?
I would encourage them.
I've had different answers from different groups. I was just curious what your group does.
No, I would encourage them and help them find an attorney who could help process a claim for a U visa.
Yeah. And the reason I ask these questions is because we're developing any statute from these hearings that would help us to curtail these issues that we're talking about here, it would be nice to know if we have to have possibly some policy or statute that would require individuals or organizations like yourself to report those situations and make it a crime if they don't. Because I'm just asking how do we improve this situation. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, let me just say that providing free legal counsel for such people would really be helpful.
Hi, how are you?
Okay.
Okay, wanted to start off by, there have been several statements in defense of this committee. It's hard to notice that this is happening within an election year. It was happening directly prior to a primary, of which multiple people who were running for statewide office chose to use this as a political outlet for their campaigns. And so to say that this is not of a political nature is, let's go with disingenuous. The title of this committee is the Special Interim Committee on Illegal Immigrant Crime. So it's really difficult to see how that isn't targeting one specific population. So there have also been statements made about immigrants stealing jobs. And I don't think anyone on this committee has heard about any job openings in the state lately in any industries, right? We're not constantly talking about industries seeking job applicants continuously. Okay, just want to be really clear about that. We were talking earlier about certain employers using undocumented immigrants and having them in slave operations, for lack of a better term, in labor situations that are abhorrent, that are dangerous. And I know that there are many reasons why folks stay in those jobs, and that's some of the questions that have been asked in this committee as well. Have you ever known of an employer using someone's immigration status in order to keep them in that unlawful work environment, threatening them to turn them into ICE or to turn them into law enforcement?
I've heard that. I've heard that from individuals who said that when they, for instance, asked for a raise, asked for overtime pay, or asked for safety equipment, that the employer has denied that and threatened them with reporting them to ICE. That's fairly common that happens. But, it's an implicit threat all the time against workers who might want to stand up to, have their job or some improvements.
And have you ever known of a criminal or someone who's being victimized by someone, that threat being used against them and that being the reason why they do not report to law enforcement is their own immigration status?
I've talked to immigrants who say they don't trust the police. It's been routine that people who have been arrested also are ICE is immediately notified. If that person is a family member, for instance, if it's a domestic violence case,
Right.
your husband is abusing you, and you know that if you have him arrested, he's going to get deported because the sheriff is going to report him to ICE,
Right.
and they'll come get him. And so, yes, I'm going to suffer the abuse because I can't lose my breadwinner.
Right.
So that kind of cooperation, which is routine especially in county jails with ICE, that is a huge deterrent for people coming forward.
Thank you.
And, just on the question of, immigrants stealing jobs, there was a study done in 2018 by the Health Forward Foundation that found that in Missouri, our immigrants created 160,000 jobs. They don't steal jobs, they don't take jobs. They are people who are consumers, who are renters, who buy things, and they create jobs because they're here and working. And so this idea that immigrants steal jobs is totally phony. It's been disproven over and over again.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions for the witness? Seeing none, you made a couple things I just feel compelled to talk about. One is, I acknowledged at the very beginning that the title that was selected for this committee is misleading. Okay, so that's a bad thing, and we admit it. There's not much we can do to change that today, except
Yeah, I
acknowledge
understand
it.
that Chairman Roberts, you didn't get that title, right?
Right. Second thing is, we've talked about how this is a political issue being done in an election year. That may be true, that the people who asked to have this committee put together have political reasons. I did not agree to it for any political reason. This is my last term. I'm going nowhere. I'm too far nowhere. So let's just be clear that whatever the motivation was for asking for this, my intention here is that we do something in the end result that helps us understand the problem so that we can understand what might be helpful to solve it.
I really appreciate that,
Okay.
Chairman. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy your retirement.
The idea of retirement doesn't intrigue me much, I have to tell you. Angela Ferguson. Good morning. If you'll state your name for the record, you have 5 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Angela Ferguson Allard, and I'd first like to thank the chairman and the committee for this opportunity to provide information about immigration in general and the impacts of crime on undocumented immigrants in Missouri. I feel that I'm qualified to do this, to give you an overview, because I've been practicing immigration law in Missouri since 1992. I began my career in immigration during law school, working with the Cuban Marielitos who were detained out at the Leavenworth Penitentiary. And then after law school, Reagan's amnesty passed, and I began my private practice in 1992. In my immigration practice, I've represented extraordinary ability immigrants, including researchers and professors and entrepreneurs, and even baseball players. And I've represented the immigrants who came to the United States for the American dream, arriving with nothing and building a great life for themselves and their families and in our communities. For years, I've defended immigrants who find themselves in the deportation process. But my current law practice is focusing on representing undocumented immigrants who are victims of violent crimes. I'm a board member of AIR, the Advocates for Immigrant Rights and Reconciliation, at the Kansas City nonprofit that advocates for our immigrant community. I'm a past adjunct professor at Washburn Law School, and I've taught at the University of Kansas School of Law, and I'm a former chair of the American Immigration Lawyers Association for Missouri and Kansas. Immigration affects all of our lives. For example, let's go for a walk. I live in Raytown, Missouri, and I'm impacted by immigration on a daily basis. I walk out of my home, I go to a yoga class. I have a Vietnamese classmate who immigrated to the United States by marrying a law enforcement person from Raytown. After class, I walk my dog down the street, and I go down Blue Ridge Boulevard, and I pass a convenience store that's owned by an Indian investor. I fill up my gas tank at the Valero station, owned by a Pakistani immigrant. I go to lunch at Mama China's, owned by Chinese immigrants. And I cross the street for dinner, and I have the best Mexican food in Raytown. It's owned by a family who obtained their visas through the U-Visa process because they were victims of an armed robbery. This is all within 1 mile radius of my home in Raytown. Our lives are connected and enriched by the immigrants who live in Missouri, who are paying taxes. I'd also like to address some of the concerns that I've heard watching the recordings of the prior hearings. As Michael was telling you, the Department of Homeland Security is the largest law enforcement agency in the United States, approximately 80,000 officers. Many of those officers do work in Missouri. There are actually more than 2 ICE officers working in Missouri. I heard that in one of the prior hearings. Homeland Security consists of several bureaus, including USCIS, ICE, CBP, and HSI, and they are all active and present in Missouri. Now, in my practice, I told you I represent a lot of victims of crimes. When an undocumented person is a victim of a violent crime and they report it and they cooperate with law enforcement, that undocumented person can obtain legal status in the United States. In the year 2000, Congress passed this law creating the U visa to encourage victims to cooperate and report crimes and make all of our lives safer. That's the purpose of this law. If criminals are behind bars, our lives are safer. There are 10,000 U visas available each year. That's it for the entire nation. In 2022, the last statistic I could find, USCIS had 188,974 pending U visas. That means that if you filed for a U visa in 2022, it's going to take you about 19 years to get that visa, and another 3 years before you can get your green card. But while you're waiting, if you have cooperated, you get a work card. So you are able to work legally in the United States. I had a family, husband, wife, and kids shopping at Payless, and an armed robber came in to rob the store, held all the customers at gunpoint. That family cooperated, provided details, helped with the investigation, and they were all granted U visas. Another man came to see me. He was in a store. It was just him and the clerk. An armed robber came in, held them on their knees at gunpoint, and robbed the place. When he fled, the clerk wanted to call the police. The man was too scared, and the clerk said, "It's okay, I'll talk to the police. You can go home." That man got nothing. He's not eligible for a U visa. The reality is that the law enforcement people who have appeared before your committee, they need the cooperation of the victims of the crimes to be able to charge and convict criminals. Sure, U visas are a tool, and it's not mandatory for law enforcement to grant it. If a victim does cooperate, the police chief does not have to sign that form that is required to apply. That's one thing you can do, is train all law enforcement agencies in the state of Missouri. DHS provides free training for law enforcement. That could be mandatory. That's.
I have a couple of questions. You spoke about representing people who are victims of crime, and I appreciate that. Every police officer knows that without a cooperating witness, it's nearly impossible to convict somebody. Not impossible, but nearly impossible. So the idea that people who are here in fear of deportation or the loss of a family member who gets deported, I understand that completely, which is why they don't report. Okay, that's the harsh reality. The other reality is it's having an effect on us. What do we do about it? So, how common, and I'm going to ask you just to give me your opinion, how common, a percentage basis, of people who are here illegally would report crime if they were the victim?
You know, I wish I had the answer for you.
Would you agree it's probably fairly small? Okay. In the meantime, we have a lot of other victims.
I think as the U visa process becomes more well-known, publicized, word of mouth, however they find out about it, even from the police officers, as it becomes more well-known, people are more encouraged to report crime.
Okay, so let's talk about the harsh reality, and I heard it earlier, so it's just a great opportunity. Domestic violence. Not every country has the same view of domestic violence that we have in this country. Here it's abhorrent, and nobody should have to live that way. But if the fear of reporting means that your breadwinner could get deported, which is obviously a dire situation for the victim, and so they live with it, I would submit to you that those who are domestic abusers may not be the nicest people, and if they have these types of visas because someone cooperated, they have like 5 years, we we are also allowing that abuser to remain in this country. I suspect that people who engage in that kind of activity probably have some background we need to know about. So how do we do that? I mean, it sounds like this idea that somehow we're persecuting immigrants when in fact we're trying to get control of an issue. So all of this stuff about the 19-year backlog and so forth, that's a federal issue. But it's the reality that we live with. What do we do about it? What can Missouri do to protect itself from both a federal problem?
Well, information, providing that information to the shelters around town, to the police officers who do encounter the victims, to the hospitals, so that hospitals are providing the information to the victims that they see. I can tell you as a survivor of domestic violence myself, not all abusers are undocumented people. U.S. citizens do it just as well. So mine was a minister, so you can find it anywhere. Information would be very helpful, and I can tell you that as a victim of domestic violence, oftentimes it's very difficult to leave because the support systems aren't there for the children. So, yeah, there's a lot of work to be done.
Okay. Representative Castillo.
See you.
U visas and T visas have been brought up today. Are they permanent visas or are they temporary?
They are definitely temporary. They are non-immigrant visas. So when you get a U visa as a victim of domestic violence or whatever kind of crime, you waited that 19 years or however long it takes, you get a 4-year visa, which is actually just a work card. It looks like a work card. During that time, after 3 years, you've obeyed the law and committed any crimes yourself, you can apply for permanent residence. Oh, it's not the courts, it's the Immigration Service. So most of the U visa applications for Missouri will go to the Vermont Service Center, and for Kansas, they go to the Nebraska Service Center. Sorry, just off the top of my head, I do not know the number of T visas that are available, but there are fewer applicants for the T visas. Those also go to the service centers. They're a little bit quicker. They're a little quicker to obtain, so you don't have the long waiting period. And when you're granted a T visa, you are eligible for some minimal public benefits. Oh yes, every time you apply for anything with immigration, you're fingerprinted and you go into the federal database. So everyone who actually applies for a work card or asylum or a visa of any kind, they get fingerprinted and vetted. No, if you apply, well, I guess if they ever applied for anything. That's correct. And if they have a criminal background and they apply for a U visa themselves, it's likely that they'll be denied.
I'm sorry, the try mic 6. You won't pass it. I'm sorry.
Check. And finally, do the U or T visas require domestic sponsorship?
No.
No. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Hello? Okay, here we go. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for all of your testimony. It's been very interesting. I kind of want to touch base on the U visas again. You were talking about how they are, they were publicized more. And there's only 10,000, but there's a chunk left. I can't remember what year you stated. But right now, how publicized is a U visa? How does one know about to get it or apply for it?
Well, I can tell you that when a client comes into my office to talk about marriage or filing for asylum or anything else, and after I've gone through all the different immigration options that might be available, I finally ask, well, has anything bad ever happened to you or to your children or to your spouse? Have you ever reported a crime? Have you ever called 911? And so they learn about it sometimes just from their immigration lawyer if they're lucky enough to get in to see an immigration lawyer. Police officers in some cities are very proactive about letting people know when they encounter a victim. They let them know that this is a possibility and that their department will help. Other police departments refuse to sign, say, we're not going to help an undocumented and illegal, we're not going to help them. So it depends on the policy of the police chief or the local commission.
Thank you so much. And then really quickly, you touched base on this about DHS offers free training. Can you very quickly explain what the training is and who they offer it to or who can apply? Because you touched base on having law enforcement. Does law enforcement not get that right now?
It's available to them. I have attended one that was well attended by law enforcement locally out at the service center in Lee Summit. They have a large facility. They provide free training for the public, so it's not just for law enforcement. And they'll do the U visa training. They'll do the trafficking training. So it's available and it's free, and they're very willing to do that.
Thank you so much.
Representative Sharp.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. When you were giving your opening statement, we cut you a little short, so I did want to give you a few moments if there were one or two key points from your opening statement that you'd like to reiterate a second time.
I think we've gotten through most of it. I just really wanted to emphasize that that's something that the committee could do or the legislature could do, is make training mandatory for all law enforcement across the state. You could do what some states have done and make it mandatory that law enforcement, if cooperation has happened, that law enforcement sign the certification within a reasonable amount of time. So those are things that would help the victims of violent crimes in the state of Missouri, and it would help us because we would get criminals behind bars.
Excellent. I'm going to encourage you, if you please, in addition to joining us today, if you have a written testimony, that also would be considered as we're writing our final report. Can you share with us some background on the cost for applying for asylum? I made it to the country, I traveled, however, and I want to apply for asylum. How much might it cost and how long does it take?
Very good question. So the actual application is free to file, and a lot of people get into trouble because they fill it out incorrectly. They have a good-hearted minister who fills out the forms for them, or a notario who rips them off and doesn't do it correctly and says the wrong things on the forms. There are free law clinics that provide services. They're vastly understaffed and underpaid. And then you can run the gamut with immigration lawyers. You can see something costing $10,000. So yeah, it varies. If you're filing affirmatively, you haven't been caught, you're filing just with the asylum office, then that's one process, but when court is involved, you can double or triple the fees for sure.
Thank you. And then lastly, someone that obtains a work card they're authorized to work, they pay, now they can get a job and they're paying taxes. Can you share with us any state or benefits they receive? Assuming kids can go to public school, but does that individual automatically get health care coverage or other state services?
Sure. No, that would depend on the employment that they obtain, right? So if the employer offers health insurance as part of an employee benefit, that would be covered. But immigrants are not eligible for public benefits. It's part of the Welfare Reform Act. It happened back in the 90s at some point. They are barred from public benefits until they've had their green card, their permanent residence, for a period of 5 years, or they've worked and paid into the system for 40 Social Security quarters. Generally, they're barred from public benefits. And if you have a medical emergency and you appear at the hospital, you're going to get your life saved, but you're not going to get the follow-up treatment that is covered. Immigrants from many countries are used to having to pay ahead of time for any medical care that they get. That's the system in many countries, and so they are oftentimes undocumented immigrants. If they don't go to the doctor, it does end up at the emergency room oftentimes, but they're able and willing to make payments on their bills. And yes, the taxpayers in the hospitals for some of it.
Thank you very much.
Test. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of brief comments in the spirit of time. There are a couple of comments made earlier that I just feel like I need to address. I know it's been addressed already, but the stealing jobs thing, I know we're probably going to hear more. But to let that statement go untouched in this city is something I just can't do. Stealing jobs, I feel like the testimony that we've heard so far really shows that immigrants aren't stealing jobs, and that most times, often than not, they're coming across to our country, really embodying the spirit of the American dream. So I believe that we're seeing the creation of jobs versus the stealing of jobs. And I want to put something else to bed on the stealing of jobs for people like myself and that represent my community. There's a glass ceiling that really exists for people of my color and people of my community and my background. So the only ones that are really stealing jobs are those that are able to ascend past that glass ceiling, past a lot of jobs that a lot of folks in my community wouldn't be able to get. So I just want to address that briefly. If we're trying to welcome folks to our state, to our country, which is a comment that was made earlier, I think that's great, and we should be doing that. But this committee, even with the chair's comments, I think it's just very difficult, just by the nature of this committee and by the nature of the name of the committee, makes it almost impossible for us to do so today. Now, there are some things that I think that we can do in the state, and Mr. Chair, like, I would be happy to sit with you and your committee on crime prevention and public safety and go around the state and get input from those in our communities to see how we can really move the needle on addressing public safety in our state. I know you have a large admiration for that. I'm sorry that we're going to be seeing you leave after your last term. My last comment, Mr. Chair, is that as we're speaking about the Hispanic community and working with the police and law enforcement, and I'm trying to see Police Chief Stacey Graves can have somebody come down and speak more on this. The KCPD, the Kansas City Police Department, had the first Citizen Police Academy, I believe it was last year, to try to bridge some of those relationships with the Hispanic community specifically. So I do think that we are seeing some steps made here locally to try to bridge that gap. And right now, I believe out of the 1,200 sworn-in officers, we have about 70 officers who are Hispanic. So I think that we are trying to encourage more diversity and inclusion in our police department. And I know the legislature passed a bill a couple of years ago to authorize higher salaries for our police department here locally. So hopefully all that can come into play and we can start to see our crime get reduced. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, and I just want to have a quick comment. And just to piggyback off Representative Sharp's comments, I represent the city of Grandview, and Grandview has a growing population of Latino communities, considered on the top in the state. And I know we didn't get to have our economic development person here today, David Carranza, but he wanted me to stress that Grandview, for example, we embrace our community, and I'm going to make sure that that I'm going to continue to fight for. I'm willing to work with you as a chair going forward. I know our libraries out in the Southland, we have classes where we invite the immigrant community to come out and learn English, for example. They have a lot of farmers markets that we support. And so all of the attacks that we hear about from this community really does have a big impact, especially when we're talking about stealing jobs. Grandview, for example, likes to fill certain jobs with immigrants, of course. $18 an hour jobs, just cutting grass. Nobody's wanting those jobs. So I've yet to see any statistics about immigrants stealing jobs. I know we hear a lot about it. However, as a committee member, I would like to see those stats, if that is a big thing. And so the main point of my comments, I want to make sure Grandview knows that Anthony Ely is in support of that community, the Latino community, and all immigrants, because not all immigrants come from the southern border. And I know we put them in this bubble, but there's multiple borders around this country, and by doing that, we are impacting every immigrant around this nation. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Once again, thank you, Chair. I want to piggyback off of my colleagues, and as a state representative, my name is Michael L. Johnson. I am of the 23rd. I represent the 23rd district. I have more ethnicities than, I'm pretty sure, probably anywhere throughout the state of Missouri. I too share in your story that you were telling us. I can step out my door and not make sure that I am capable of patronizing these different, very unique, wonderful businesses. And I too am in full support of making sure that my community knows what is important to me, and that's them. And we know that we have things that we have to work out, and we do have to make sure that we have a better system. But I think that we need to make sure that we do that in a bipartisan manner, and that we get this thing done, because it's important not only to us as representatives, but also to the people that we represent. Thank you.
Just a witness. Before we turn you loose, first of all, there's a sign in the audience. I'm going to ask you to please put that down. Thank you very much. I want to thank you because you returned us to the subject that we're really here to talk about, and that's crime. We get a little distracted, and it's easy to do. I'm going to accept Representative Sharp's offer. My hope is that by the time we finish with this committee, we have 2 more hearings, that we will have been able to accumulate enough information to have some idea of what we might be able to do. And if the answer to those questions is legislative, then I'm your huckleberry. So thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you. And I would also like to say that the Grandview Police Department and the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department are very supportive and have trained their officers.
You know, you touched on something. I know that there are agencies out there who don't live up to what we would like to believe that a police officer is or a police agency is. It is heartbreaking to me to know that there are agencies that would say, well, you're illegal, therefore you're fair game. The police officers I grew up with, the ones that taught me how to do this business, would never have tolerated that. But I know there are those who do. It's reprehensible, frankly. Thank you. Jerry Nolte. If you would state your name for the record, you have 5 minutes. Proceed when you're ready.
Thank you very much. I'm Jerry Nolte. I am currently the presiding commissioner of Clay County. I was a state representative from 2004 until 2012, and during that time, I was the chairman of the Special Committee on Immigration. So we have been kind of through a little bit of this. Actually, I've been in your chair, and I realize it's not always the most comfortable chair to be sitting in. So I appreciate the fact that so many representatives came forward to tackle an issue that is not only important, but very difficult. During that time, we passed a number of pieces of legislation. Probably the largest one was House Bill 1549 in 2008. There were some subsequent pieces passed. It covered many facets of the immigration issue. I realize we're here mainly to talk about those that apply to the criminal aspect of immigration, but certainly I'd be happy to answer questions regarding any of that comes to mind. Border immigration is primarily, obviously, a federal issue. One of the things that we had done in our committee work was we obtained some experts that were able to keep us on the right side of federal law. Federal law is obviously superior to state law. So we were able to work through what we could and what we could not do and make sure that we were compliant with federal law. One of the things that I think that we take some pride in, that is to say the committee that I had led, is that of that legislation, to my knowledge, none of it has been successfully challenged, so it is all at least legally compliant. Depending upon how much you may or may not agree, we have done a scrupulous job of making sure we stayed within the law. And in some cases, we wrote into state law that it would fluctuate. As federal law changed, our laws would follow it. It seemed like a good way to stay current and to not let our laws get unnecessarily stale. The thing is, we put that together, and we have come to a situation now, and it's a very different world than it was back in 2008. We've talked about employment. Employment issue was much different back in that year, so we've got a lot of different issues going on there. One of the things that we complained about at the time was the lack of action on the part of the federal government. I guess some things never change. Particularly in recent years, there seems to have been a lack of engagement by the federal government, and that is, I think, resulted in a lot of unnecessary crises that we have, not the least of which is the fentanyl crisis, human trafficking, stress that we see right now in all of our systems, particularly the judiciary system, and a situation to victimize both citizens and migrants both legal and illegals, or undocumented may be the better word to use. But in any case, my reason I came here today was we are obviously been living some time in the world of term limits. And so what I would like to be able to do is to be a resource, talk about what we did then, what the current law states, and to give some reference to that. So I would like to be, like I say, a resource to the commission, or this committee, if they have some questions about how we got there. As we try to go forward into the future, it helps to know where we were in the past. And so I just want to make myself available for that historical reference. And I kind of hate to say that because it makes me sound even older than I am, but there we are.
Some of us are sympathetic to the older discussion. So I'm very interested in spending some time with you. One of the downsides of term limits, of course, is we lose that historical perspective. So I'd like to know where you were, how you got where you are, and what is it that you didn't get to do that you think might help us. There really are no limits here in terms of suggestions.
One of the things that, there were a couple of things that impelled me to become involved in this issue. One of them was higher education. It came to my attention that a person here who is undocumented to attend a Missouri college could do so less expensively than a U.S. citizen. That struck me as wrong. I think something that came up, and I think it's something that's good to bear in mind, is Missouri law is in fact in place to benefit Missouri citizens. Those are who, as people elected, we work for, are those who voted for it. That was one of the issues that brought me to the fore. Another one was speaking to a man who has I assume he still does, but he had a business. He was in the trades. He came to me and he said, look, here's the situation I find myself in. I'm trying to run a small business. I'm hiring people in this country legally. I'm trying to pay them a good wage. I'm trying to make sure they have benefits and I'm trying to make sure that we give them good working conditions. He said, but my competition is out there hiring folks in this country not legally present, paying them terrible wages, giving them no benefits whatsoever, and working them into the ground. And that also struck me in the same way that the higher education issue struck me, and that is, how did we get up to a point in this country where someone can start a business and try their best to be compliant with law, work along the rules, be a good employer, and yet they're being driven out of business because of other players? That told me that the situation needed to be addressed. Now, that was before the vast numbers of people coming in now. So that issue has been exacerbated, which is why I wanted to come and why I'm happy to see that you folks are taking hold of this issue, because legislation passed back in 2008 and in that era needs to be revisited and I think refreshed, because the situation we are in is totally different. It seems to me that if we're going to solve a problem, we need to get our arms around the scope of it. And the number of people who are in this country and came across the border, vast. I mean, the numbers vary, but there's a vast number of people. It seems to me the way you solve any problem is you stop the problem from growing and you deal with what you have. And you put your solutions into place, then you talk about the rest of it. To me, some kind of a way that we can get our arms around this problem, and as long as it's expanding as quickly as it is, it's not going to stop. The last thing I'll say is it occurred to us certainly that while it's a federal issue, state and local governments are impacted sometimes very dramatically in any number of ways, whether it's services, whether it's whatever. The subject came up about training for law enforcement officers. That's great. The training is free, even better. However, when we as a county send officers to be trained as we need to and as we want to, post-certification or whatever training we're looking at, that also requires that officer to be off the job for a number of hours, or in cases, it really depends. So that is a cost that we have, and we are having difficulty coming up with the ability to bring in police officers, or law enforcement officers, I should say, so that we are able to cover those spaces. So by saying the training is there is great, but it doesn't solve all the problems we have locally. We're a good-sized county. We're over 250,000. When you get into these smaller political subdivisions, they don't have the deep benches to be able to necessarily just say, we're going to send, officer so-and-so off for training. So I think one of the things that is good to keep in mind is impact on local governments and how it is that we can still deliver services to our citizens, particularly those that have the less deep bench, I guess is the way to put it.
You'd find that most police agencies would agree that training is good, but they'll balk at the idea of investing more hours off the street. Representative Engel.
Good afternoon, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Okay, so in your expertise, what were the solutions that you would suggest that the committee follow?
It's a big issue. Could you narrow that down to some specific nuance of it? Because I think if I were
Do you have any specific suggestions for the committee?
I think you need to refresh some of them. I think that there are things.
Refresh what?
I think one of the first things is employment in sanctuary cities. One of the things that concerns me is in the city of Kansas City, specifically. We have prohibition in the state against sanctuary cities. The city of Kansas City is currently issuing fountain cards. Now, they say explicitly on their websites that these are not to be used for acquiring benefits, or more specifically for voting. But what we have is a situation where a governmental entity is issuing government-issued photo ID cards. It's a very short step.
Okay, so your concern is undocumented immigrants voting?
No.
Okay.
Well, it is that, but no, my concern is that we are giving photo ID to folks who are not legally in this country, and that we should not be doing that because that is the job of the federal government. That is an oversight by the local government.
Okay, so I don't know if you were listening in to any of the law enforcement that testified in previous committee hearings. They often said that one of the issues that they dealt with is undocumented immigrants not having photo ID. So they did disagree with you on that because it's a form of identification that helps them throughout the course of interacting with immigration law and seeking their work visas and whatever else they may need, right? Okay, so so it sounds like you have an issue with Kansas City being a sanctuary state, even though that's illegal at the state. Okay.
Well, to be clear, and I want to be fair to Mayor Lucas. Mayor Lucas would not say that Kansas City is a sanctuary city.
Okay.
I think that's something of an open question because the consequence for being a sanctuary city under Missouri law is a loss of state funding.
Okay. Would you say that Kansas City is a sanctuary city?
I think they're flirting with it. I would not, because there are enough legal and financial consequences of that importance. I would I'd be much more comfortable going through a lot more research before I would actually make that statement. I will say they are going that direction, though.
Okay. So that was a no?
That would be, I need more research before I would say,
Okay.
make a definitive statement.
Were there any other suggestions that you think that the committee should follow?
Yeah, I think
specifically?
going into the employment part of it is an important one. It is currently not legal to hire someone to hire someone who is not legally in this country, and there are sanctions. You can enforce, you can make a complaint, and then those folks have to come forward. But we need to be able to make that a little bit more easy because if
So
someone
like through the rule-making portion of it, or do you want
it's
to
really
see
relatively simple,
like
actually.
penalty enhancements?
I think more information on that because one of the previous witnesses said that they knew of someone who hired someone who was not here legally to work. Those can be reported, and then that company will have to make the case that the person is indeed legally in this country, or they will have to make the case that they are not.
Right.
They will have to make the case that they are not aware they did not knowingly hire that person.
So your suggestion to the committee would be a streamlining of the process?
I would say getting
A
it out there a little.
penalty
I would say get the information out there a little bit more in that. But like I
So
say,
do you believe that's the job of the state legislature is to get that information out more?
communicating with our constituents, yeah, I'd say that's part of our job.
Okay, so that would be your suggestion to the committee is that we broadcast the currently existing law.
There are a number of things that I think I really don't have a list. I'm just here mainly just to say I don't want to necessarily give you, I want to tell you what to do, but what I want to do is be able to tell you what we have done, and then it really is your decision to say what we should and should not be doing. I'd be happy to have that conversation, but we got to have to narrow it to a specific issue because it's really complicated.
Well, the specific issue of this committee is crime. Did you have any recommendations pertaining to crime?
Yeah, I would say that we need to be more educated. We would have to have our officers more in tune with what's going on right now. There is there's something of a gap, there's something confusion, so I think there has to be a more
Education, like more training?
Yes, well, they need to be, that information needs to be disseminated in a more effective way.
Got it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we have been through now 4 witnesses in 2 hours. We still have 8 witnesses to go and 1 hour to our hard stop. We have one more for this witness, Representative Castile.
You can go ahead and wait, Chairman.
Next up then, thank you, sir. I'm going to call up Major Kerry Thompson, CPD. Thank you for being here. If you would state your name for the record, who you're affiliated with, please be sure to fill out a witness form, and you have 5 minutes.
Absolutely. Good evening. Good afternoon. My name is Kari Thompson. I am a major with the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. I represent the Community Engagement Division. I I also have with me here today Officer Chato Villalobos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. I know it's kind of a short notice, so we sure appreciate it. Just wanted to see if you could provide any information. Earlier in the committee, we spoke briefly about the Citizens Academy program. My understanding it's a fairly new program. Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
This is the second year that we've done the program, so yeah, fairly new. I think our objective with that is to understand that there are numerous languages that are spoken in our city from people who are here, whether they're refugees or for whatever reason. What we want to make sure as a police department historically is that everyone feels like they have a right to be protected and served, regardless of status, regardless of what they look like, talk like, walk like. So for us, the biggest belief with our current chief is that if people don't have a relationship with those of us that have sworn to protect them, then that makes it harder for us to resolve issues of quality of life issues and crimes, and it makes it people more vulnerable to being victims of crime. That transcends whether they're citizens or not. So we do have numerous partners in our city who work with us to reach all the different demographics in our city. And so we partner with them and they let us, hey, we have some people that are experiencing high crime in certain areas. And so we never ask whether they're citizens or not, or what they look like, or what religions or anything, how they classify themselves as nationalist or not. We just like, hey, how can we be assistance? So this Citizens Academy is one of the things that we came up with, where we surveyed our community partners to say, do you think if we provided numerous opportunities for people of these communities to come and be informed on how to either reduce the opportunity of them becoming victims or participate in the 911 system, so that if they do have somebody in their communities who are affecting quality of life, whether it's violent crimes or property crimes, that they can trust, that they can call us, so they can see that we are a department that has numerous officers that speak Spanish, numerous officers that themselves are either first generation Latinos and their parents came here for whatever reasons in the past, that we are a department that thrives to try to look like, walk like, and talk like the people of our community. So we're kind of hoping if you guys had any questions as for how we deal with whatever you're dealing with, how we try to be proactive in just in the issue of crime, so that people who live in Kansas City feel like they have a resource that they can share amongst themselves, or they can maybe protect themselves from people who exploit people who are in vulnerable positions. So anything we can do to answer questions. I've worked in that field as a community police officer for the last 17 years, so I feel pretty confident. Hopefully we can share some of the policies that we've done over the years.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you both for being here. Could you speak to us about demographics as far as how many bilingual officers that we have on the force and the benefits?
Yes, sir. We historically, and I mean, I've been on 24 years, and since I become a police officer, and way before that, we've always paid officers in Senate, and whether it's sign language, different types of language, Spanish was one of the ones that we do pay officers incentive, because as you all know, sitting here, that, you know, my mom's she became a citizen, so we can't tell by the way she talks, if she speaks with an accent, whether she's undocumented or not. So we have trained our officers thoroughly in the dangers of racial profiling anybody. So we have numerous American citizens that are here that do speak with the accent, but they don't think or act with an accent. They are contributors to our society. So the main, to answer your question, our demographic is only, when we take reports, we ask, where do they live? What are their phone number, male, female, social security, just things that we're able to help track them as victims and so that we can communicate with them. But we have about the same information as you have as census. We are not allowed to ask if people are legal or undocumented because that violates civil law. And so we want to make sure that we're also upholding civil rights. We're not trained as ICE agents, so we're not qualified to do that. We do work very closely with our ICE components if they ever ask for any type of help, if they're looking for somebody. There are resources as far as our database. Like in my experience, speaking from my experience, ICE is in charge of finding slaves. I can't think of the term right now. What is it? When they have people and they bring them here to work. Human trafficking, thank you. So our ICE agents are the ones that handle that locally, and so thank you. We do work with them closely with that kind of stuff. They understand that we have a relationship. If they're looking for violent criminals, they have access to our systems. But as far as how many bilingual officers, I don't have an exact number for you, but I know it grows. It's a continuously growing. As a matter of fact, some of the kids that participate in our PAL programs who speak Spanish, we have a good number of them that have come aboard to become police officers later on. So
Presently, our numbers for bilingual officers is probably at less than 100, and that is Spanish, Swahili. We even have Mandarin. Oh my goodness, we have Mandarin. So we do have officers that are on our streets that are very fluent in Spanish. We have French, Mandarin, Swahili, Arabic. Also have. So we're under 100 at this point. We would love to increase that. With that skill pay, we have a Spanish immersion class that we have not given in the past couple of years, but we're trying to push for that. That really encourages those English speakers to learn Spanish with the incentive of pay. And so they will have to go through a test, and then once they pass the test, they're able to get that skill pay added on to their pay because they are bilingual. The encouragement of it, in encouraging, the bilingual, encouraging us, just come and talk. Come talk with us, come meet with me. I can meet with you about it and try to get our department to be, we are so proactive in so many ways, but we can be more proactive in this aspect of ensuring that we have a more bilingual force of officers.
the biggest challenge in that incentive, in that initiative is fiscal. And also right now, as everybody knows, current affairs, we are short on manpower on the police department. So that would require us to take officers out of the field or supervisors to go through that type of intensive training. It was like a 5-week program, I believe. No, actually, it was 13 weeks.
And they also would go to Mexico in regards to the Spanish immersion. They would also visit the country.
So as fiscal, we'd have to bring in an instructor, house the instructor, and then also take the pool officers out of their respective fields, whether they're specialized units or patrol officers. So those are some of the biggest challenges why it went away, because as the numbers decreased in our profession, we owed it to the public to be able to answer 911 calls, so that wasn't a luxury.
Way, or do they offer the bilingual officers a bonus?
Yes, so there is a pay incentive. It's considered a skill pay.
Thank you.
Representative Castile, then, I'm sorry, Hovis, then Castile, and Thompson. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I understand you are a current officer with the Kansas City Police Department.
I am.
Thank you very much for your service. I did 30 years myself. We had the same thing. Cape Girardeau, much more limited. We had several officers that speak Spanish, but we also had private individuals that we could contact that was on a list. So if we brought someone in that did not understand our language. I appreciate the work you're all doing on that. Do you think the funding levels in Kansas City Police Department is going to be helped with this last bill that we passed to give you guys at least a minimum
I'm going to defer to my majors. I don't make that kind of money to have that kind of opinion in public, sir.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that it's going to. That's why that was brought to the initiative there, because maybe some of the local government here was trying to decrease your funding. So I'm hoping this will give you additional funding to meet some of these resources that you're currently doing. And I just want to point that out, that hopefully there'll be some additional funding on the way. Secondly, by working within your groups, we had the same thing down there. We had people that were working in our community and were there. They came the right way. They went through legal immigration. They lived here. They did the parts that require you to become a citizen, which is to have good character, good morale, morals, working in the U.S., learning English and civics. Because if you speak English, sometimes it makes you less likely to be a victim being taken advantage of. But I also realize that sometimes that's a long process. I don't know very much Spanish, and I've been trying to learn it. I only know probably 10 or 15 words. But do you think that having that relationship allows you to probably find people that are creating crime in that community, having those contacts?
Absolutely. We have a vibrant, vast, dynamic community here in Kansas City. It's a rich melting pot. And we are doing everything we can in all aspects, in every aspect, every corner of Kansas City, to impact and to influence those in the community, to know that they are safe, to know that they can trust us. And guys, when I tell you this is a daily job. It's a day-to-day job trying to build trust. And so that's what we're doing. And so absolutely, by building trust in our communities of color, building trust in Northland, Southland, East, West, absolutely, it is our job. Job number one. Fighting crime is hard, but if you have a good relationship, it makes it even easier. Absolutely.
Well, and that's why I wanted to bring it up, is because we found success in that also, because the people that were here legally, that came and obtained that status, were more likely to let us know when they saw things going on in that community. And we had one instance where there was people that were being, this was another person that was from Mexico originally, came here the right way. His daughter married one of our officers who spoke fluent Spanish, and they said there are people coming here that are being trapped into working at 2 or 3 businesses there for things that we've already discussed about, for very low wages. We're in fear of their lives if they would have reported to anyone. And when they reported that to us, we obviously, with DHSS, we were able to go in there and pick up about 30 people, including the ones that were kind of, I think, keeping a heavy hand on top of them to make them doing this, and it helped with the whole community then. Secondly, and this was brought up earlier, I just want to confirm with the police department there, maybe one of your other officers is going to come forward. They talked about a sanctuary city status. Do they restrict you from being able to do certain things because someone here is here illegally that may be charged with a crime? Do you report that to ICE so that they can maybe go through the paperwork process, or is that something that's causing problems here in your city right now?
We don't have a relationship as it speaks with ICE. We work autonomously. We do not work with ICE. We are not ICE agents. So we haven't had any issues in regards to sanctuary cities, non-sanctuary cities. We don't get in the weeds of that.
So the state of Missouri does have, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
The state of Missouri does have a memorandum of understanding that they have signed with DHSS, and ICE is a subsidiary of that. Does Kansas City have an MOU in place on how to deal with people that are arrested for crimes or felonies after they've been here, whether they're here legally or illegally, but would be under a status that could result in them being sent back to their home country?
The Kansas City, Missouri Police Department is not a participant, and we have not been given marching orders in regards to the Sanctuary City MOU. So at this time, we have not taken any action, and there are no plans to take action at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Representative Castillo.
Chairman, I can't speak for everybody on this committee, but my focus is trying to determine the facts regarding the headlines relating to illegal immigration and crime. So without specific data, how can we determine where the truth lies? With that in mind, is KCPD currently tracking crimes committed against illegal immigrants or by illegal immigrants?
We are tracking crime as it relates to all citizens here in Kansas City. If it is a bias crime based on race, religion, creed, sexual orientation, absolutely those are tracked. We have a partnership with the FBI where we have a hate crimes task force where those numbers are tracked. But presently, Kansas Kansas City is experiencing a crime problem. So we are looking at all aspects, all demographics, all genders, races, creeds, and we are trying to determine what is the cause of the crime in Kansas City.
So are tracking data?
We are tracking the data for all in Kansas City, yes. We are not making any specific, line items based on,
With all due respect,
yes.
how are we supposed to extrude the truth or to dispel the allegations?
Yes.
How do we
By
break
when,
it
by
down?
when the questions are asked, we have some fabulous analysts that can actually help us to pull out that information based on the parameters that you've listed and noted. Absolutely, we can.
I guess more specifically to the crimes that are going unreported, or those who are confined or detained for a limited time. I mean, this is already statute effective 2017, that if the arresting agency is unable to determine nationality or immigration status of that person so confined, verification shall be made by the arresting agency within 48 hours. Query to the Law Enforcement Support Center of the United States Department of Homeland Security. So this is already a statute that you guys should be checking the immigration status or legal nationality of the person, and then you should be conferring with your counterpart, as Representative Hovis has mentioned.
Yes. Presently, when we ask those questions, we ask those demographic questions, that is all the officers are asking. They're asking for the race, they're asking for what gender, and the particulars of the crime that the person is reporting. At this time, the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department officers in our patrol bureau are not asking the question of legal status or illegal status.
Well, if you guys would start doing that, it would help us to determine what is happening and what's not happening. So, how can we go on a lack of information? I mean, you said that there's a increase in crime in Kansas City.
Yes,
What type of crimes are increasing in Kansas City?
homicides, crimes against persons to include bullet-to-skin shootings. Presently, our homicides are down 30%. However, our shootings are up. We're also seeing a lot of property crimes. I know you guys have all heard of the Kia Boys. Well, the Kia Boys are here in Kansas City, and they are wrecking. The Kia Boys are a group of kids that have learned how to steal Kias of all makes, models. Also, they're stealing Hyundais, because somehow Hyundais and Kias are alike. Well, guess what, kids? They've now moved on to Chargers and Dodges. And what they're able to do is use a USB cord. Get this. Off of YouTube, anyone can learn how to do it. It's unfortunate. And use a USB cord to start a Kia, to start a Hyundai. And so we have seen a rash of those. And we're finding demographically, chronologically, our juveniles are the culprits in our city for those car thefts.
Are those increases in crime isolated to certain neighborhoods throughout Kansas City?
We are seeing more in our urban core, the east side of Kansas City. Absolutely. We are seeing more crime in that area. Presently, our East Patrol station leads, which is at 27th and Prospect here in Kansas City. It leads our city in homicides. We're at about 87 homicides right now. East Patrol is probably at around 30 of those. So absolutely, we're seeing this violent rash in our east portion of Kansas
And
City.
does Kansas City operate similar to triage in where they dispatch officers? Do they follow any sort of crime statistics in order to increase the number of patrols in certain areas?
Absolutely. We use something called risk terrain modeling, which is a computer app that pretty much lets us know, based on where we're seeing crime, what patterns and trends are next. When we are dispatching on calls, the dispatchers are using a priority system. Our homicides and shootings are going to be, of course, priority one. Any violence against persons are going to be priority one. And those dispatchers are going to dispatch officers from across our city to this location. In some cases, we'll have officers from up north coming out east to handle a call because they're the only ones available.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to follow up on some of the comments and questions of Representative Castile. I agree that if we're not going to be able to find out the immigration status of victims as well as perpetrators, I don't know how we can gather data. And hopefully it's in that data set. You said people can pull that out and analyze subgroups, as well as what types of crimes. Maybe are you noticing any increase where, again, illegal immigrants are perpetrating more crimes or accused of perpetrating more crimes of a certain type? And do you have any of that type of data at this point?
We can take this information back to our chief of police, Stacey Graves, and our executive staff and let them know that that is a concern of the collective. Absolutely. Presently in Kansas City, we are seeing the highest number of violent crime being committed by African American males. We are also seeing the highest demographic of those that are the victims of crime in Kansas City, also African American males. Last year in Kansas City, we had 182 murders. 119 of the 182 were black males. 116 of the suspects of killing those black men were black men. So we are looking at demographically right now, the highest demographic being a victim being black men in Kansas City. However, I will absolutely take back the concerns of the collective and how you feel that we need to also set aside that for what you're needing. But again, our analysts are amazing, and I feel that I'm more than confident that they would be able to pull that information out if the collective so desired.
So we would need to know, are they citizens, are they non-citizens? And that would be incredibly helpful to our committee, and I think also just to headlines, so that accurate information can be out there. Are you noticing any increase in drug crimes?
No.
In Kansas City? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
Come today.
Yes.
So how many people had died of drug overdose in Kansas City in the last year?
So since fentanyl has now topped being the #1 killer of men and women from ages 18 to 41, I would say a lot, sir. I don't have the exact number for the year of 2024 of what we're looking at for drug overdoses, but fentanyl is pretty much topping that. Go ahead.
So you said that homicide. To me, you sell dope, and I sell it to your daughter or your son. That person died. To me, that murder.
Yes, it
so
is.
Do you treat it as a homicide, or you do not treat it as a homicide?
We currently track that as an overdose. Yes.
You don't treat it as a homicide?
Well, it's
Because-
up to the prosecutor. Usually they get to determine whether we investigate it, we submit the information to our elected prosecutors, and they get to decide whether it's something that was accidental or if there's an intent to harm. That really, we don't get to.
Because there is a tracking that we'd have to track down where this individual got the fentanyl. Let's just use fentanyl. Where they received it, where they purchased it, where they got it. In those cases, absolutely, I could see that happening.
Well, you basically you have to buy it from someone.
Absolutely.
And whoever's selling that dope to someone is a
Absolutely.
murderer that pushing.
Absolutely.
So,
And unfortunately, that's easier said than done to be able
Oh,
to
it-
track
I know.
down that.
It's very-
But I
very
am
much so.
I am with you on that. I believe you. And
Yeah.
it's unfortunate that fentanyl has unfortunately taken a lot of Kansas Cityans because of it.
In my town, Butler County, at least 20 people die a year from that. And so
It's awful.
that's one reason I like to shut the border down, to allow anyone cross the border, let them come illegally, and that would slow down the drug trade. Anyone coming across the border to bring drugs. So that's something that would save a whole lot of life. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am.
Hello. Hello.
Thank you both so much for coming in. I was an investigator with the Jackson Children's Division for a really long time, so worked hand in hand with you all. I've also worked in hospitals alongside of you, and so proud of the work that you all do with community policing within the community, and have really seen positive results in how that reduces crime. So I want to thank you, first of all, for being there and the work that you do do every single day. I've heard, and you all have been asked, and people have been asked, and law enforcement officers have been asked from across the state in committees previous to this one about why is there no data, or why can't I get the data on crimes committed by illegal immigrants, which is the subject of this committee. And the frustration with some of my colleagues about not being able to obtain that information. And I've generally found that when folks make an allegation, such as that there is a huge amount of crime committed by any demographic, they're the ones who generally have the obligation to provide that data. It's not the folks then attending the committee that are, so you're in no way obligated to provide us with any data that would provide confirmation bias the assertions made by this committee. Just want to be really clear about that. What can we do as a legislature to help you all reduce crime? Because we've taken it upon ourselves to control Kansas City PD. So what can we do to help you lower crime rates?
What we're seeing in Kansas City with this rash of crime is that we have a conflict problem. We don't know how to talk to people. We don't know how to talk to each other in Kansas City. So conflict resolution, say it again. If we could teach it in kindergarten, that would be amazing. And we're doing it kind of with our DARE program with fifth graders, is teaching people how to talk to one another.
Like through social emotional learning and things
Social
like that.
emotional learning, through emotional intelligence. And I know it may sound, wishy-washy or, not the fad
I've worked in schools in that area too.
Relationships
Absolutely.
and what we're seeing, the murders that we're seeing and the motives behind the murders. If I were to tell you a couple of stories, you would say, no, that did not happen. Yes, it did happen. Where we have brothers fighting over a piece of food. Where we have sisters and a mother fighting over something ridiculous. I mean, the things that we are seeing, the men and women, our victims, our poor victims in our city, dying over conflict, talking, conversation, being able to deal with, you know what? Okay, agree to disagree. You're right. I'm going to walk away. Or I'm not going to bring a gun to an argument.
So would you recommend early intervention and prevention programs within the community?
Prevention, intervention, yes. And we started in schools, absolutely. Help us get this out into our schools. Help us get this out to our community groups. Conversations. But when we find out that the vast majority of our homicides at the heart of the matter is conflict, we have a problem.
One of the things that I see just over the course of my career where you guys could really make a difference is, as my major stated, like the number one victims and suspects were black males. There's a lot of things that exist systemically that affect those communities, like the inequality in schooling or the lack of food, healthcare, housing, those kind of things. We're the last line of defense for people to just keep some form of peace in the neighborhood. Things have gotten out of control when you're calling us. There's a lot of things that I think could be prevented that I think Congress, elected officials can really make a difference that'll help us where you won't need as many officers. I don't think we would have a shortage if some of those things were addressed in more marginalized and impoverished communities. But until that help comes, we try to do the best that we can to try to assess every situation, whether it's a violent crime, property crime, to make sure that we're at least giving the people education so that they can prevent it, minimize opportunity of becoming a victim by just giving them education on certain things, what's going on in high crime areas. We try to partner up with not-for-profit agencies or government agencies to make sure that people are connected to resources so it doesn't get to that place where people are either dropping out of school or just they can't really market themselves as employable because of the places they grow up around. There's constant trauma that they're facing. So we understand a lot of our parents don't have coping mechanisms, so they can't teach coping mechanisms. But that happens because historically of where they were raised or the lack of opportunities is my experience. I'm not speaking on behalf of my police, but I'm hoping that a 24-year veteran could give you guys some insight on what we face where I work at least.
I know that we touched on this earlier briefly, but can you, for the edification of the committee, just kind of briefly give an explanation on what community policing, the model entails, and then like the benefits to it and how it directly impacts the subject matter in this committee?
I'll allow you to answer that question.
Very briefly and succinctly, community policing is being a part of your community. Being a part of your community. Letting the people that you know that you're serving, I'm your neighbor, because I am. I'm your neighbor. I'm just here because you're not getting along, or I'm here to help you with the problem, the coping mechanisms. And typically we meet people on their worst day, right? Their worst day. But being able to build those bridges, rebuild those bridges in some cases, we have found that we cannot keep up right now. The Community Engagement Division cannot keep up with all of the community events that we're invited to. That has never happened. It's because we're building relationships. Community policing is all about relationships. I'm your neighbor. We're going to be neighbors. We're alike. We have more alike than we have apart.
And my brief answer would be, community police officers allow us, when we have enough people that we can delegate to police officers, it allows us to go into high crime areas, do a true assessment, like they call 911, jail doesn't fix everything. Sometimes we get to the bottom by connecting them with their local not-for-profit church. Some people just don't understand that some programs exist. And so we try to connect them so that they don't have to continuously live in that trauma or whatever is going on. If a kid drops out of school, we know those neighborhood schools. We try to get them connected. So community policing allows us to do a full assessment of the 911 call instead of just keep going back there to the same problem. And then somebody eventually ends up in a criminal justice system where we could have prevented that if we just connect them with our community partners.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for coming very much. So just to sort of clarify what I've just been hearing from the Kansas City standpoint, if we want to reduce crime, in your opinion, the kind of things that we need to do to reduce crime in Kansas City, if we can have programs to deal with conflict resolution, ideally some things to deal with some of the systemic issues in some of the areas, particularly where we have high crime, additional community policing, would those have a bigger impact than focusing on specifically illegal immigrant crimes, in your opinion, and what you see given the number of crimes in Kansas City?
I'll let you in on a secret. I have 13 of my police officers at a de-escalation conflict resolution training right now. And they're there with community partners, city partners, social workers, behavioral health specialists, and they're all meeting for hours talking about conflict resolution, de-escalation. So yes, sir. Affirmative.
So those kind of things. And that's part of what I think what matters to constituents in Kansas City and Lee Summit, where I'm from, that kind of thing, is less crime. How do we reduce crime, period?
Yes.
When I talk in my community about it and talk to our police chief, he tends to talk about mental health and co-responders and things like that being his priorities. His first thing, and not to dispute that there is illegal immigrant crime, that's not the first place they're going if they want to reduce crime in our community. And that, I don't want to misstate what you're saying. That's more of what I'm hearing from where you would prioritize and where the police department is prioritizing.
Yes. At this point, we are throwing everything up against the wall and seeing what sticks. We're trying to see what Kansas City needs. What does Kansas City need? Not what we think they need. What do they need? That's by talking. That's by reaching out and having conversation. Presently at this time, when we have officers, we have 6 social specialists, service specialists. We have 6 divisions. Do you guys know that our social service specialists correspond with our officers? Because guess what? That tool belt we have around our waist, it doesn't have every tool to solve every problem. But if we have a social service specialist with us, we're going to figure it out together. So we have gone to that. We're having that co-responding. Having our behavioral health specialists coming out with our crisis officers as well from the local hospitals, helping us out. We are smart enough to know that we cannot do it alone, and that violence is not going to stop with just us only. Jail is not the only answer.
Right.
It can't be. Plus, we need a jail.
Right.
Just
Well,
put that in there.
thank you very much. I want us to work on the issues, to prioritize the issues that really matter to the people who are being impacted by our citizens. And so if that issue, if one of them was truly, if one of them is truly illegal immigrant crimes, then we need to focus on it.
We would.
But yeah, exactly. And I'm sure you know, if someone commits a crime, whether that's from someone who's undocumented or not, you're going to try to address that. But I am concerned about that isn't the big priority that we have. And when I say I'm concerned about it, that's not the biggest issue. It doesn't seem like. Do you have any sense of percentage of? And I'm probably not, because we've heard there's data gap maybe, but my sense in some of the other testimony we heard in more rural areas was that, well, one sheriff said it was less than 1% of the crimes in his county.
And we don't, with intelligence and with knowledge of that, I don't know the percentages.
Sure.
And don't want to be on record saying a particular amount when it's not. And, I want to represent the men and women of KCPD well here today, so I want to make sure that we're speaking from facts.
Sure.
I don't have that info, but I have expressed the demographic that we are seeing a large amount of violence and crime that are victimized.
And thank you. And you are representing the Kansas City Police Department very well. So thank you both.
A question too. I know about 20 years ago, there was a concern from the community about undocumented people 20 years ago. And I don't remember the commander's name, but I do remember they said, all right, well, let's ask ICE if we could partner up. And ICE told us, like, we don't have that kind of budget to go and guess just because somebody speaks with an accent that they're illegal. So if you find somebody and they're arrested, we have access. We know who we're looking for. So after that interaction, I remember specifically our leader saying, if we just treat everybody like they have an opportunity to report crime, regardless of their status, those who want to participate in the process have come forward. And there was a community in particular, as a predominantly Latino community, crime was reduced by 63%, and ICE quit showing up. So we don't know who's undocumented, but we can tell you that as long as we continue to do what has worked over the last 20 years under my watch, is to make sure that everybody has access to 911 and communicate where there's issues of quality of life, that we have been able to reduce crime as far as violence and property. Like, I can't speak honestly that happened. I had never been given the opportunity to serve anybody if they're illegal or not. All I know is that we follow civil law, we follow state law, we follow municipal law, and if you guys want to change that, that is up to you. But our officers work very hard to make sure that people feel safe to call us, regardless of accents or what they look like on the outside.
Well, thank you.
For this witness, Representative Murphy.
Yeah, I'm going to make this real short. You know, I've always worked on the credo of fix the problem, not the blame. And I admire the fact that you two sit here and give us heartwarming facts. That you're looking at the situation in a holistic way and saying, you know, we've got to deal with our community. We've got to understand where everybody comes from. And I so much appreciate the fact that you never once blamed anybody for this. You just said, we've got a problem. We're dealing with it. We're talking to our community. We love our community. It's part of our community. And I appreciate you coming. And I'm very impressed. Thank you.
Okay, before we turn you loose, I want to do away with something. First of all, Major, I apologize I mispronounced your name. Won't get it wrong again. As I pointed out, I don't think you were here. The name of this committee is very misleading. Our concern is crime related to illegal immigration. So if I understood what you told me, you could not today quantify for me how much crime occurs in our illegal alien community, either by them or against them. Is that correct?
I cannot today give you quantifiable evidence on crime that has been committed by our undocumented community.
Okay. I'm going to ask you if you would take back to your chief the understanding that this is a problem that goes on all over the state, and it's in varying degrees. It may be worse in the rural areas than it is here. The challenge for us is trying to quantify it. How do we determine if this is really a problem or not? Some of us think it is a very big problem. Some of us think it is overstated. But there's no way for us to know if we don't quantify it. So I would ask you to ask your chief to consider if you can find some way to quantify this, even if it's just a checkbox, something that would help us understand the magnitude or lack thereof.
I'm documenting.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you very much. All right, Representative Weber, could I ask a favor of you? We have 1, 2, 3, we have 7 more people in about 20 minutes. This is not going to happen. Could you check with your contacts, see if they would give us an extra hour? Okay. All right. Acknowledging that we're going to be squeezing people in here, I hate to limit testimony, but on the other hand, there are a lot of you who are here who waited patiently for a chance to testify. So we're going to go to a 3-minute presentation and 3 minutes of inquiry. I'm going to ask the committee, please be respectful of the people who waited here for a chance to testify. Let's make sure that we give them the opportunity. So next would be Mary Samberger. Might be somebody who got tired of waiting. Mary Samberger. Okay. I'm having a little trouble reading the handwriting. Christina, Christian. There we go. I really appreciate your patience. Yeah, if you could, if you could state your name for the record, if you have an affiliation, tell us who that is. Be sure to fill out a witness form, and you have 3 minutes. Okay, you're in good shape then.
Well, I was going to say good morning, but it's good afternoon. My name is Christina Hasso. I work for the Guadalupe Centers. I've been there for 22 years. I was hired as a homeless case manager. Sorry. Okay. My name is Christina Hasso. I work at the Guadalupe Centers. I work as a family support case manager for 20 years now. It'll be 22 years this October. During this time, I've encountered many requests for help from families, including immigrant families, documented or undocumented. All are here trying to provide a better life for their families. Many end up being exploited. Numerous of our families have been exploited in the last 20 years. So for examples on the people that have been unfortunately exploited, we work with ICE. We get calls from the ICE department here in Kansas City to help trafficking victims. So we'll go and help them put those victims in hotels for the night, for 2 nights, get them clothing, whatever they need at the time, and then might be called 6 months later or a year later to help another victim. So that's how we work with them. We don't do anything other than that. But aside from them being exploited, we also have numerous families that work tirelessly, 12, 14 hours a day, sometimes 7 days a week, to support their children, and are not paid at the end of the week. Maybe promised, oh, well, let me cash my check, I'll get you in a couple of weeks. Still not paid. Even they're trying to pay for their rent, they're paying for their gas, their lights, their food, and everything else that we all pay for every day. They're scared to turn people in. They don't want to tell their story because they're being exploited. We have victims of domestic violence that don't want to reach out and take that step. There's a lot of agencies that are around that help those victims, us being one of them, but there need to be more, and there needs to be more help given. The attorney Angela Ferguson was poignant in what she said. We just need to welcome people, to not let them think that they're going to be turned over or deported because they've been beaten or they've been severely injured. I can't imagine having that happen to a family member, much less a kid that is seeing this in his own home. Well, we're going to take your whole family, we're going to take your father away, but we might turn your mom in because she might not be documented. We can't have that. We have to protect everybody in the state of Missouri, whether they're documented or undocumented, but especially them when they're exploited. Most recently, in our office, we had a family that paid $1,800 rent for a house, $900 deposit, $900 a month for rent. It was rat infested. We have videos. The mom was bitten. She went to the hospital. She was 9 months pregnant. And they were harassed by the landlord because they didn't think that they were going to push, because they might have been documented or undocumented, sorry. So they weren't even allowed to get their personal items, their birth certificates, their immigration paperwork, anything out of the home. It was locked up, and we ended up having to call KCPD, and they assisted us getting into the home. Okay, sorry. Okay, I can't even think. I'm so sorry. I know that there's obviously work to be done on a federal level to provide comprehensive immigration reform, and that's what we've been asking for years. I understand that this committee is attempting to look at the crime element, but we've got to also remember that these are hardworking individuals. In the year 2022, this is the last thing I'm going to say, undocumented immigrants paid $96.7 billion in taxes, not million, $96.7 billion in taxes, federal, state, and local level. That money is money they don't have access to. That is going to keep our infrastructure, our hospitals, and our Medicaid going. I appreciate you. Thank you, sir.
Human trafficking component, and how do our immigrants find themselves caught up in these trafficking scenarios?
And I will tell you the truth, sir, that is not my expertise. Literally, when we get a phone call, I'm willing to help the trafficking victim when ICE calls us and they need to put them in a hotel. I know that they're in a process at that point, but I don't know what it is, and I don't ask a lot of questions. That would be for the immigrant or the immigration attorneys. I'm so sorry.
Okay, no problem. And then did you have any, again, restate any recommendations that you think this committee should be considering?
I wish that we can do something in the state of Missouri to get driver's licenses for undocumented individuals. I know that some people don't want that. Oh, and I had a couple of different other things. 5,000 T visas are given a year. These are the trafficking victims. Somebody asked a question earlier. 5,000 T visas are given yearly for all of the United States. Welcome our immigrants. I'm sorry, can I just say one other thing? I'm so sorry. Undocumented students pay 3 times more than a resident. So it wasn't what the gentleman said. Also not eligible for FAFSA. President Ronald Reagan, this is it, I promise. We welcome immigrants and refugees from other countries because they make us better. They bring knowledge, work ethic, culture, food, and excitement. They make us better, and they bring out the best in the United States. President Ronald Reagan.
Thank you very much.
Representative Thomas Penhovis.
Yes, thank you for being here. I did have a question. If we don't know how many illegals we have, then how do we know how much money they're paying in taxes?
Because they have an I-10 number that is given out by the Internal Revenue Service. That is how.
So we do have.
I have a document right here if you'd like to take it.
We do have some data.
Oh, yeah, it's from the Internal Revenue Service, gives out those numbers.
Undocumented is what we're talking about, not documented, undocumented.
Undocumented. I'll give you everything that I have right now.
Okay. So again, if you can collect that kind of data, I still have a concern about why we don't know when it comes to crime and other statistics, why people are unable to ask either a victim or a perpetrator as to their status? Because obviously it gets reported in other circumstances.
No, I don't work for the police department. I can't answer that.
Okay. And do you have any idea what the cost of services provided to those undocumented immigrants is, if it's anywhere near equal to the amount that you're saying that they pay in taxes? Again,
What
education,
services?
social services, hospital care, mental health services, et cetera.
Well, it depends if they have insurance, I would assume. I mean, a lot of my undocumented people have insurance. I mean, if you work for a company, you're going to get medical insurance. So I guess it depends. Everybody's going to be on an individual basis. I think that's across the board. Because you said Medicare, medical.
We're conflating groups here. I'm talking about undocumented and services that are being provided to undocumented immigrants.
Well, I don't work for those entities. I don't know how to
You're
answer
a
that.
social service agency, so cost of services that you
You just said hospital bills and things like that. I don't work at the hospital, so I wouldn't know who pays that stuff. I mean,
thank you.
Seeing none. Thank you.
I appreciate you all. Thank you.
I'm just going to call Ralph. No. Ralph, I think that's correct, yes. Is Ralph? Okay. Afternoon, sir. Welcome. If you'd state your name for the record, who you're affiliated with, you are, and you have 3 minutes to proceed when you're ready.
Ralph Orpeza, and I am a business manager for the Greater Kansas City Building Trades Council here in Kansas City. I'm a International Brotherhood of Electrical Worker, 33-year proud member of that, and I have been blessed to now be the first Hispanic business manager here in Greater Kansas City since it was brought to life back in our early century. So I am a son of immigrants who came to this country and overstayed their visa. And my mother got her citizenship when I was a junior in high school, so 1985, the same day of the parade with the Royals. So that is how I remember when she gained her citizenship. So I'm here to answer any questions on how this impacts my labor community, because I know there is a lot of crime, especially in wage theft. What we don't have is punishment for people that employ. We don't have punishment for people that absolutely enslave some people that are here undocumented. So we are always, my big plight is the plight of human rights. That is why I am the leader of the unions here in Kansas City. That's why I joined the union. It's because it made a difference for me in my life back 1991 when I handed my mother my apprenticeship letter, and she cried because she knew our trajectory of our family was going to change forever. Thank God they didn't close the border back then, because you would not see Ralph Orpeza here standing before you, and my grandchildren would not have the same type of future that most kids will never get to enjoy. It was a dream. So as a leader of this community, as a leader of my community, leader of the labor force, I will say, let's not dehumanize people that are coming over here with the plight of making a better wage, because we don't know what that hunger is like. We will never know that because we've been privileged to be born here in our zip code. So when I hear people say the right way, I want to understand what that right way is when people really don't understand that plight. So I'm here to answer any questions what it has to do with wage theft or how it affects, that crime affects my community here in the workforce.
We are concerned both with crime committed by illegal aliens plus crime perpetrated against them. I don't know how we quantify either one. Maybe you have some ideas for us. So clearly, the idea of taking advantage of someone's status in order to underpay them, provide them some kind of de minimis benefits, is a crime. It is. There are other kinds of crime perpetrated against people who are reluctant to report. Can you help us understand how, what's the magnitude of this? How do we go about getting a loop around the
Yes, I
real
can,
problem?
Representative, I can help you. So the first thing you need to do is get a hold of each area building trades. That was what I would recommend, is you get a hold of who's in charge in that area. That is with the building trades. Also, find out if your municipalities in that area have responsible bidder language being enforced in your municipalities. That goes a long way. Responsible bidder language helps put some guidelines and some standards on protecting prevailing wage. When you have incentivized contracts that are out there, they're being exploited, well, that's against the law. But how do we fight that? Well, that's compliance. Does your municipality have the right amount of resources to follow compliance? How many officers does that county have? I can tell you right now, Jackson County here has 2 in the whole county. 2. How do we do that? How can a county the size of Jackson County only have 2 compliance officers to take care to police this prevailing wage? And why is prevailing wage so important to me? Because that keeps everything fair. Our apprenticeships are the gold standard in this country. We've been doing it a long, long time. Our doors are wide open for everyone to come in and join us. But you know what? We have some bad players out there, and they lie, especially to immigrants. And they use that social status to keep them under the rocks. So how do we find out if we don't have compliance? Start with compliance. Start with your building trades. Find out how you can partner up with them and how you can find out with those municipalities to get better compliance. Better officers out there. I'm not talking police officers. I'm talking about wage enforcement officers to get out there and find out what type of jobs are incentivized, that the taxpayers are paying for, and find out if the contractors are fair. That's the first thing. That is the first thing you guys can do as a legislation. I can hear you now. I know you, Anthony.
Grew up in labor. I worked for a law firm that represents a lot of the big states, Missouri, Nebraska, and Kansas. And prevailing wages is a big issue, even when I was a Peggy Browning fellow. And so one of the things that I've seen in the legislature is there's been an attack on specifically this issue and preventing it. I know under the hand operations happen a lot, and we say one thing about people stealing jobs, X, Y, and Z. However, we don't address this. And so the rhetoric that goes on in Jefferson City, how do you think we can help convince our colleagues to make this more of a bipartisan issue when it comes to word choice or how we speak in committee, the type of bill we present, and how we can get businesses who are legitimate businesses who there are a lot of them, like J.E. Dunn, for example, who want to work with unions, on board with dealing with this issue, because prevailing wages, I think, is a necessary thing to keep, wages at a fair level across the board. So,
it's a great question, and thank you for asking that question. We are constantly under attack. Right to work language is always coming after us, and that fuels that fire to keep workers at a lower standard. I will also tell you this. Why I hold prevailing wage so important to us is because we have some protections in there, okay, to at least have a minimum of a 1-to-1 ratio, especially here in Jackson County. I'm a journeyman electrician. That means that the young man or woman that is sitting next to me getting ready to do the job is getting taught by a journeyman level wireman that knows his skill set and is going to turn that down. Bad players, well, that doesn't necessarily quantify to that. Okay? We can show that we've gone through a DOL approved program, gold standard program, to be able to teach someone. That's all we're asking, is for everyone that shows up on that job to do the same thing. Take the union, non-union part of it out of it, and just do that. Okay? The bad players will stick one guy out there that kind of knows what he's doing or does know what he's doing. He's got 4 or 5 helpers, 6 or 7 helpers. That is a recipe for disaster. And we see that over and over is wage theft, misclassification. Today, up on a job, we see a young person doing a job. What are you doing? I'm a laborer. The next day, we watch them. They're doing plumbing work on a TIF job. Are you getting paid TIF? Are you getting paid plumber rate? No, I'm getting paid labor rate. The following day, they're electrician. This happens all the time. So to answer your question, how do we do this? I'm open for suggestions. I'm open for suggestions all day long.
And I appreciate that. And I do have one more follow-up question. This is just about the safety aspect of it. So
Yes.
can you speak to just the dangers? If, unions train in a certain way.
Absolutely.
For example, some of the bigger projects was the stadium projects, or you have some of the heavy construction building projects. And if you don't have the safety training for some of these projects, but you're allowed on the job site, how does that impact the work? And what are the ramifications of that?
Right, so
As quickly as you can.
okay, so
I know 3 minutes is very
okay,
long.
right, and I could talk all day too, guys. So
I apologize if my question is off track. So
the ramifications of not being properly trained is tragic. We lost a life here at AT&T building last year. A young man, I think he was from Honduras, came here to work. Where was it? Nicaragua. Fell to his death out of an elevator shaft. No lighting in that. Company didn't care. They brought him over from Indiana. He worked here at Indiana on a city project as a temp, not even a member of our community, as a temp. And he lost his life tragically. How terrible is that? We get OSHA training, OSHA 10, OSHA 20, OSHA 30, and even OSHA 500. That is what our apprenticeships go through. That's how we prevent that. So anyone that's doing work here in Kansas City, whether you're union or non-union, it is wage theft if those people are not trained to that standard. I don't care if it's a tip job or not, that is wage theft.
Then Representative Murphy.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for coming today. And this goes kind of back to those stolen jobs, whether they be stolen jobs from union members or unfair competitive playing field. And so that's, I think the term stolen jobs is misinterpreted, and it's, I think it could be articulated a little bit better to represent the fact that some of these people who are not paying taxes or getting paid cash are reducing the access to those jobs that the building trades would have. And I couldn't agree more that the building trades have potential to reform a lot of our urban cores through positive leadership, positive mentorship, the connection to other tradesmen, the opportunity for them to have health insurance and pensions. And that's a much better American dream version of the American dream than just being capped at some, hostile workplace. So I couldn't agree more, and I would love to participate in any program that would help encourage urban youth to take a look at the building trades. But, I think that the term stolen jobs is a little bit overused, and I think that you guys are an excellent example of some of that revenue lost, especially in the Roofers Union in St. Louis, where you've got a lot of subpar wages being paid to illegal immigrants who are performing these large TPO projects that are worth millions of dollars, and they're going to the lowest bidder on those projects.
If I may, they're not stolen, they're given.
True. Good.
There's never been a person who did a job that job was not given to them. They did not steal it.
Right.
Okay? I want you guys to remember, if you remember anything about me, that is that. No one gave me anything, and I didn't take anything. I earned it. Okay? The other thing, the roofers, that Steve Gracconi, the business manager of the roofers, he would tell you right here, he would give work visas to every single undocumented worker right now because they cannot fill those calls. I'm sorry, guys, there's not a lot of people that look like you that are lining up to be roofers. Okay? So let's get that reality. Okay? They're not. Yeah. So, there's white roofers, but most of them are not. Okay? What I want, if you want to help, a faster track to get people to work. If they can work, They can become union members. They don't need your help after that. We've got that. We've got our insurances, we have our benefits, we have our retirement.
Right.
It's no weight on our government.
I appreciate that. Some of the contractors who are hiring the subs do not have the insurance, do not withhold the payroll taxes.
So
And that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, so let's slap their
Unfair.
hands. Let's slap their hands. Let's put
Couldn't
them.
agree more.
Let's attack them instead of Bill Ivey putting a blowtorch on immigrants on a big commercial. Why don't we start attacking when they hire illegally,
Could
when
not
they're
agree
breaking
more.
the law?
So
We
this
don't
is-
do that. We'll never do that.
This is about crime, though.
That is crime.
That's
That
right.
is wage theft.
That's exactly what I'm trying to reiterate in support of your comments here just now.
Yeah. I appreciate that, and I had a great conversation with you out there. And please, guys, don't mistake my passion for anger, because it's not. This is something that I'm very passionate about. Like I said, I am a son. I'm a first-generation American. Okay, and I couldn't have done it without my immigrant mother, who never gave up and didn't know. I didn't even learn how to speak English till I was in kindergarten. Didn't really even master it till about 5th grade. So it can be done. This American dream can happen. And when people say, let's do it the right way, well, hell, we can't even fix the right way.
So back to the wage enforcement officers, you would propose that they operate mostly in these urban areas where we could identify illicit or illegal contractors or illegal employers and hold them accountable.
Absolutely. Accountability, and it starts with compliance. Like I said at the beginning of my statement, compliance.
I think Representative Murphy filed that bill 2 years in a row and probably will file it again. It does speak to that. So we appreciate you as always. Thank you very much.
I'm going to be a little more of a Nazi about our time limit, because we still have people who want to speak. Representative Murphy, you have 3 minutes.
As you said, I've filed that bill 3 years in a row now. I believe that it's the contractors are the people here that are the problem. It's not the legitimate contractors. It's the ones that don't go out looking for legitimate workers that have been trained and so forth. They're looking for the cheapest source of employment they can get, and unfortunately they take advantage of our immigrants that are here undocumented, because they're the ones that are just willing to do whatever work they can get, which, as you say, people look like me probably don't do that. But we do need to control how much is going on under the table. That is something that is just destructive to our economy. It's destructive to you and your union. It's destructive to the way of life in America. It's not the way the American dream is built. It's not built on the cheapest guy you can get and pay him under the table. Don't pay taxes and don't give him any benefits. And by the way, if he gets hurt, send him off to Arkansas and ditch, because you can't take him to the hospital, because you don't want to take responsibility for what you've done to that person. So yeah, we can do that in statute in Missouri. We can protect our workers. We can protect them by making sure that they work for you and not for these people paying them underneath the table. When I say stealing jobs, well, you're right. Maybe it's stealing wages, it's stealing work. But it's doing it because they're doing it in ways that are not the way that we do things in America. We pay a fair wage, we give good benefits, we do all of those things. If we're not doing that, then there's something wrong.
And said, and I appreciate the way that you responded. It meant a lot to us, to some of us, I know for sure. But to reiterate on it, I think that when we're saying the word stealing or stolen or stole, I think that we need to make sure that we are going after those business owners, not immigrant workers. Let's start there first, and then let's make sure that we have opportunities to see who's undocumented, who's documented. And then, first of all, let's remember one thing, that the only race that I am is the human race. And I think that's important, because we have to take care of people, and especially, to reiterate again on what you said, there aren't very many roofers that do look like any of us up here on this panel. But there are some. But words and rhetoric play a big part. Willing to work, want to work. I know people that want to go work, and I know that they're right here in Kansas City. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. I will say this real quick. I'm one of the chairmen of the Missouri Works Initiative. We try to put people of underprivileged economic hardships, even if they've gone to jail. We try to give them a second chance at life through the building trades. Okay, so I want you to look up, if you haven't looked at the Missouri Works Initiative. The other thing too, so remember the human rights aspect of everything. If you can't remember anything, remember the human rights part of that. So if people are enslaved, their human rights are being taken away, and we're better than that, America. We're way better than that. And with that, if that's all you have, I can step away, sir, if you want.
Okay, further questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you. Do I need to turn this in?
I want to be sure that you've turned in your witness form. Good. Christy Marino. Afternoon, if you will state your name for the record, whoever you're affiliated with should fill a witness form, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Crispin Rhea, City Council member here in Kansas City, Missouri. I represent the 4th District. I was elected citywide, but represent the 4th District, which includes a population that is about 27% Latino. And so neighborhoods like the Northeast, the East Side, and West Side are all in my district, as well as downtown, Westport Crossroads, and a big chunk of the North End. But I'm not necessarily here to speak to you today in that capacity. I'm here to talk to you as someone who's a former prosecutor of almost 10 years in Jackson County. 6 of those years I spent in the Special Victims Unit, where I prosecuted domestic violence, sexual assault against women and children, domestic violence-related homicides, as well as sex crimes against adults, rape, those types of things. I had about 26 jury trials under my belt and secured convictions against rapists, murderers, actual rapists, actual murderers, and did so for the vast majority of my professional career as an attorney. You know, it's been said several times since the few minutes that I've been here that your purpose here is to discover the extent to which illegal immigrants commit crimes, or a way to quantify that. And I can't help but feel that you've got solutions without a problem, because I'm here to tell you that my direct professional experience prosecuting in a county, probably the county in Jackson County with the highest proportion of Hispanic and Latino folks and undocumented folks, I could be very clear that the vast majority, the vast overwhelming amount of cases I prosecuted did not involve crimes committed by folks who were here undocumented. And so I'd like to think that I'm a bit of a subject matter expert on that topic. What I will say is I saw many more crimes committed against undocumented folks. And what I want to leave you with today, and what I want you to understand, is the chilling effect that the rhetoric, whether it's on this committee or on the numerous ads we had to watch on the news these last couple weeks, what you need to understand is the chilling effect your rhetoric has on a victim's willingness to come forward and testify. Made my job very difficult as a prosecutor when folks feel like, honestly, it's open season on them. They are less likely to call the police when they're victimized. They're less likely to, if they do call the police, respond to a prosecutor that wants to get him in to testify at trial. And they're less likely to be engaged in any way, whether it's with the school district or any other formal institution. What that means is folks commit crime and they get away with it and they get off with it, especially if they know they can victimize someone who's an undocumented immigrant. You know, words do matter. The things that people say do matter. I grew up in a blue-collar family where we kept to ourselves. We didn't pull punches. We didn't attack folks unnecessarily. We didn't villainize or dehumanize others. We worked hard and kept our heads down. Yeah, I appreciate that. And so, you know, what I want to leave you with is the rhetoric matters. It has direct real world impacts on how folks engage with our government and with our institutions. And I could give you an example of where that's happened in my career. So I'll stop there. Happy to answer any questions since crime seems to be a big topic.
To be supposed to be. So, first of all, I want to thank you for your work as a prosecutor. If there's one area of law I find most important, it's domestic and sexual violence, and I appreciate the fact that that you dealt with that. When you spoke about not having had undocumented workers come to you as perpetrators of those crimes, how do you know that?
So
if they don't report it, how do you know?
Right. So some do. You know, what the way the system works is a crime occurs, maybe someone calls.
I was a police officer for 40 years. I get that.
Yeah. So a police officer refers the case to the prosecutor's office, and it's our decision to make an assessment on our evidence. You know, one of the important determinations is if you have a victim who's willing to testify. As you are aware, you often do get some indication from law enforcement if this person is, you know, in the country undocumented. And so I know this because when I would try to find them or get them a subpoena for trial or talk to them about their testimony or get them in for a deposition with a defense attorney, they would not participate. You know, we had victim advocates who would talk to them about the U visa and that being available to them if they did come in and testify against the perpetrator. And these aren't necessarily workers. These are mothers. These are women who've been assaulted. Are individuals who physically assaulted. You know, they've cited fear about coming in. It took a lot of work to get your victim to the point where they felt comfortable coming in, and a lot of convincing that if they stepped foot in the courthouse, they weren't going to be deported.
But if you know who they are that the crime was reported, how do you know how much crime was not reported?
You're asking about how many cases go unreported to police?
What we're struggling with here is trying to quantify the things that we don't know, like how much crime occurs, both as the perpetrator and as the victim, against people who are not here legally. How do you know?
So I can't quantify how many folks do not report, how many undocumented folks do not report crime that occurs against them. And I don't think you'll be able to quantify that because as counterproductive as it is, I think the rhetoric that these folks are exposed to prevents them from coming forward. And so I don't think you'll be able to quantify the extent to which that happens, but I can tell you that happens.
Understood. Okay, Representative Taylor, then Representative Ingram.
Trial cases. Can you tell us how many of those cases included illegal immigrants?
As a defendant or a victim?
As a defendant.
26 jury trials, not a single one of those cases included prosecution against an individual that was undocumented.
Thank you. You've said even from your experience as a prosecutor that it's, did you say rare or just, you said that we see so many more crimes committed against immigrants and so very few that are perpetrated by immigrants. Can you repeat that, or from your experiences as a prosecutor, what have you personally seen?
The vast majority of crimes I prosecuted, whether they went to trial or were pled or some other resolution, did not include defendants who were here undocumented. It wasn't a large number of folks who were victims that were undocumented, but it was a larger number than those who were defendants. And so I think that's consistent with all the statistics that are available and who does and does not commit crime in this country.
Excellent, thank you. And then if you can quickly tell us your understanding of trafficking. How do our immigrants get involved or wrapped into human trafficking scenarios?
So I don't have a lot of direct experience with a lot of those cases that are handled at the federal level. I've certainly worked in neighborhoods in Kansas City where there are organizations that work to get women out of those situations. And so, my knowledge there is not direct, other than I know that jobs, wages are often things that are used to hold folks hostage. When you're talking about individuals who are being trafficked for sexual exploitation, certainly that does happen. Did see a fairly high level of sexual assault that occurred within those contexts of women who were subjected to that. But other than that, I don't want to speak beyond my expertise.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Engel?
Good afternoon. Yeah, is there anyone behind me?
Unreported crimes, but we know that there are data collection surveys such as the National Crime Victim Survey, the Uniform Crime Report, that keep track of the data of unreported crimes, such as that's how we're able to extrapolate crimes such as sexual assault, rape, domestic violence, et cetera, that don't necessarily, charges aren't pressed, maybe a police report isn't taken, but they have some kind of a community interaction, whether it be with a social worker, whether it's a hospital situation, something like that, where we're able to gather that data. So I think that's kind of where some of the confusion lies with how do we know that there are all of these victims that are undocumented immigrants, but we don't have the specific data. But I would say that it is probably similar to the way that we are able to extrapolate data like that of sexual assault and domestic violence. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think with a strong assumption that the final product is going to be an undercount. I mean, we know from the census, for example, that it is very difficult to get an accurate count of certain populations. So I think with that assumption, yes, but I would be hesitant to draw a lot of conclusions from that data because folks are very hesitant to come forward in this environment and engage in a survey.
Well, and it tends that whenever we do university reports around anonymous sexual assault surveys, and folks anonymously self-report they've been victims or survivors of sexual assault on campuses. So we're able to gather data like that. And so while there may not be a police report or there may not be a criminal charge, we're aware that there's underrepresentation due to that underreporting.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I'll say that just about every sexual assault case I had included someone who went to a medical provider, got a SANE exam through that awful process. And I think part of the reason is because cases that came with that level of evidence were the ones that referred, and the ones that usually didn't have some of that available unless there was a delayed disclosure about an assault that happened years in advance or years prior to. And I would be willing to say that I think that's probably a more accurate measure, because I think folks in that environment, sexual assault victims in general, will be more willing to be forthcoming with a medical provider than necessarily law enforcement, whether it's a detective or a police officer.
Mm-hmm. And that's regardless of their immigration status. It's kind of across the board.
Absolutely, yeah.
Agreements have expired. Representative Burns.
Hello. Hi there. I don't know if you can see me. I feel like there's been a lot of political ping pong going on here, and in the end, most of us agree that we're not blaming immigrants. We're not saying that people that come here are only coming here to commit crimes, but somehow, because we're playing ping pong back and forth, we're missing the biggest thing that was said here today, and that is fentanyl deaths are the number one cause of death between 18 and 41. We owe it to the families of those that are dying from fentanyl to figure out why. And from what I've heard from at least my side of the state, fentanyl is not being created in our community. It is mostly coming up from borders. I even heard somebody say it's from the Canadian border. Right, okay, that's great. Let's figure out where they're coming from how they're getting here, and let's have conversations about that. I'm absolutely just tired of talking about how it has something to do with somebody buying a house, somebody not buying a house. We have dead Missourians, and we know they're coming from the cartel. Now, maybe on your side of the state, you guys found somewhere else to get the fentanyl from. But on my side of the state, 28 cartel members were arrested last month in Missouri. So for us to sit here over 2 hours and dance around every topic we possibly can, except how people die and all of the crimes related to the smuggling of that drugs, is a disservice to Missouri. So please tell me, is the fentanyl crisis missing your area? Because when you were a prosecutor, my husband's a criminal defense attorney. 6 years ago, he was fighting meth in our area. Now he no longer is doing that. He's having fentanyl addicts die before he ever goes to court with them. Tell me what you're really experiencing with fentanyl in your area as an elected official.
It absolutely is a crisis. Last year, so I took office in August of last year, so when I came on, the council and mayor were in the process of working with the health department to gather information to learn what we were really dealing with. What we looked at first were fentanyl-related deaths. The majority of those were happening in my district. We crafted some programming and other things through the health department to start addressing that. When I left the prosecutor's office, I think I left just before some of these crimes really started hitting us. I had some crimes involving children where a child would get a hold and touch something of that nature, and then you're dealing with prosecuting the parents. So I don't know the numbers. I'm assuming you're from St. Louis. I don't know the numbers that they're dealing with, but I think it's fair to say it's a crisis across the country. And I think border security and enforcement, are not entirely related to what policies we have in place for the law-abiding folks who are in this country. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that there's a lot of violence associated with cartels that operate on the border. I mean, I don't think anyone denies that. But I think our approaches to complex issues need to be complex. You go in with a scalpel, not a hammer.
Perfect. So that's what I wanted to kind of clarify, because you were talking about your experience 6 years ago and saying that it's not related to immigrant crime. And I'm just saying, let's focus on, let's just cut it what it is. We are here because we're trying to figure out how these cartels are getting into our state, how the fentanyl deaths are going through the roof, and how we can attack it. Because I still haven't learned anything today, like I had the last time, about how to gather some data on that, some of the stuff with the crimes that are related. Since there wasn't a lot of fentanyl trafficking when you were a prosecutor, do you hear any more from your prosecutors about that now? Or do you not talk to them much?
Yeah, I do, but they're mostly in the special victims unit, so those crimes are not drug crimes or necessarily related.
Because we will pass 3 minutes.
All right, well, thank you. I just wanted to get that on the record, that you weren't a prosecutor during the crisis of fentanyl. Thanks.
Yeah.
Representative,
Well, I wouldn't say that. That's important to get on the record, okay? But
we just diminished all of the crime when we're here to find out really how to solve this crisis.
I really didn't handle drug crimes. The way I saw those was in endangering the welfare of a child type crimes. Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, there we go, thanks. If we're getting things on the record, just want to clarify that this is not the Special Interim Committee on Fentanyl Overdose Crime. This is the Special Interim Committee on Illegal Immigrant Crime. We are here to discuss those issues. We are listening to witnesses who are here to share their personal and professional experience in this arena. If there are representatives here who thought we were solving the fentanyl crisis, I think they're in the wrong room. And I want to thank you for your testimony, Councilman.
Thank you.
before we move on, I want to clarify something too, and I've said this repeatedly, and I don't want to take issue with my fellow committee. However, I've acknowledged repeatedly that our committee is poorly named. This is a committee about crime related to illegal immigration. And there's a world of difference between that and illegal immigrant crime. Okay. So it's misnamed, I acknowledge that, but let's try to remember that this is related to illegal immigration. There's lots of things that affect that. All right, any further questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
All right, thank you all.
Laura Rodriguez. Okay. If you would state her name, be sure she's filled out a witness form, and then you have 3 minutes. Proceed when you're ready.
Okay, my name is Laura Rodriguez. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Laura Rodríguez y soy inmigrante mexicana, líder de AIR. Decidí mudarme a esta ciudad en el 2018 con mi familia buscando nueva oportunidad laboral y profesional. Conforme ha pasado el tiempo, he vivido diferentes desafíos como inmigrante indocumentada, como encontrar un buen empleo, adquirir vivienda, acceso al lenguaje, transporte, racismo, entre otros.
Good afternoon, my name is Laura Rodriguez and I am a Mexican immigrant here of here. Sorry. Good afternoon, my name is Laura Rodriguez and I'm a Mexican immigrant leader at AIR. I decided to move to this country in 2018 with my family looking for new work and professional opportunities. As time has passed, I have experienced different challenges as an undocumented immigrant. Finding a good job, acquiring housing, access to language, transportation, racism, among others.
Soy una sobreviviente de violencia doméstica. En el 2022 estaba en una relación con un hombre violento y manipulador. Cuando me di cuenta, me decidí retirarme, decidí terminar con la relación, lo que esto provocó mucho enojo en él.
I am a survivor of domestic violence. In 2022, I was in a relationship with a violent and manipulative man. When I realized the danger I was in, I decided to end this relationship, which caused a lot of anger in him.
Él vino a mi departamento y ponchó el tanque de gasolina de mi camioneta con un taladro durante la madrugada. Estuvo rondando mi departamento esperando que yo saliera decidido a matarme. Esas fueron las palabras exactas. Me encargaré de enviarte al infierno aunque vaya a la cárcel. Ebrio, enojado, celoso y armado.
He came to my apartment and damaged the gas tank of my truck with a drill. During the early hours of the morning, he was hanging around my apartment waiting for me to come out, determined to kill me. These were the exact words: I will send you to hell even if I go to jail. Drunk, angry, jealous, and armed.
Estaba aterrada y llamé al 911 diciendo, mi novio está fuera del departamento amenazando con matarme y estoy segura que está armado. Por favor, envíen un policía. Ayuda que no recibí de forma inmediata. La policía tardó 2 horas en llegar.
I was terrified. I called 911 saying, my boyfriend is outside my apartment threatening to kill me, and I'm sure he's armed. Please send a police officer. Help that I didn't receive immediately. It took 2 hours for the police to arrive.
Al parecer para ellos no fue una llamada de emergencia. Tuve que llamar 3 veces más. Cuando ellos llegaron, él ya no estaba. Solo Dios sabe por qué no me disparó. Me hubiera tomado menos de 1 minuto matarme. Mientras tanto, los oficiales decidieron si responder a mi llamada de emergencia o no.
Apparently for them, this was not an emergency call. I had to call 3 more times. When they arrived, he was no longer there. Only God knows, but he didn't shoot me. It would have taken him less than 1 minute to kill me. Meanwhile, the officers are deciding whether to respond to my emergency call or not.
The 3 minutes have long since passed.
Okay, can I continue in English? Oh, okay. So, when they finally arrived, they making a written report and explained to me that there is one shelter where I can ask for help if I don't feel safe. I called Hope House and they received me immediately. In less than 3 hours, I had already lost my home, my job, and my stability emotional. Basically, everything that's emotional. I was wary of losing my life, and of them I was now emergency. I felt that I was doing things right because I was very brave to report, hoping that the justice will be done, even though I was afraid because I didn't know have immigration status. I tried to trust on the efficient work of the Jackson County officers only to find out a month later, 1 month later, that there was no report in the system. I felt angry, frustrated, and helpless because since I do not have legal status, I felt that I don't have any right to demand. I couldn't help but think that I will be deported because I was one of the many treaties that I received from my ex-partner. I had to go personally to ask the police officer why he didn't make my report. To which he said, from my point of view, I was just a normal argument between a couple. Wow, I responded surprised. So it is normal for the police officer for a couple to argue while they point with a gun in my head. So I'm really scared. Obviously, he can answer anything for me in front of me.
And I don't want to cut you short.
I know. Thank you. I went to the municipal court requesting for help with the prosecutor. The prosecutor helped me a lot because she called to the police officer and she tells him, you have 24 hours to do a report. So if I don't have any report, I can do nothing about it because my demand probably dismissed. So after that, the prosecutor gave me a letter from domestic violence, and it is the reason why I can apply for Visa U. The Visa U, I have to wait 5 years to get Social Security or to get whatever work permission. I'm still waiting. I can do nothing. I can have a driver license. I can have an ID, and I work hard. I'm a hard worker. I'm a single mother. I try to do everything right. So the reason why I'm brave to report with the police is because I know my rights, because Advocate for Immigrant Reconciliation helped me a lot. They educate me to know my rights. And too many, ¿cómo se dice? Asociaciones sin fines de lucro. A non-profit association helped me a lot, and I'm worried with my community. I don't want to see another woman like me afraid. And I don't know if you know that too many women around the community don't call to the police because the police don't want to help.
I've let you go on a long time because your particular circumstance is one I find most offensive. I'm sorry you've gone through that. And if you were let down by law enforcement, I'm sorry about that too. Representative Sharp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a brief comment. Your story is chilling at best. I can never imagine the struggles of being a woman, of being an undocumented woman. Your story sounds eerily familiar, unfortunately for myself. My older sister had a similar circumstance, and we lost her to domestic violence from her boyfriend when she was a senior at MU. I understand what that fear would have been like, and like you, the Boone County prosecutor, did do our family any justice that summer. I just want to thank you for being here, and hopefully you can be an inspiration to others who may find themselves in similar situations. So I just wanted to thank you.
Gunn, thank you for being patient and for being here.
Thank you.
Next up is Ricardo Flores. Okay, Manny, I think it's a Barca. My high school teacher would have said that your handwriting and my handwriting was an awful lot alike.
I tried to get a doctorate degree and it didn't work out for me.
If you would state your name for the record, if you fill out your witness form, proceed when you're ready. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Manuel Abarca. I'm a Jackson County legislator. I represent 130,000 people here, Kansas City, West Side, Northeast, predominantly Latino communities. I need to start because I, like Ralph, am not a direct children of immigrant, but I'm a great-great-grandchild of an immigrant, and my 2 children are grandchildren of immigrants. My great-grandfather earned his status, his legal status from Mexico, by earning a Purple Heart in World War II. My Teamster grandfather and Teamster father invested in me to go to college. I was actually inspired to be here sitting in this chair, both as an elected official, as this person, by individuals like Jerry Nolte. Not because he was an inspiration to me, but because he was a passionate speaker about anti-immigrant rhetoric. If I were to say where to start, it would be to undo everything that Jerry Nolte did. When it comes to licensures, when it comes to access for education for undocumented immigrants, I'm not talking about giving them scholarships, I'm talking about access. The reality of weaponizing police departments to somehow become Gestapo for immigrant communities, those are the things I would set to undo. But what I want to present to you is the data you asked for. So I believe that this was submitted, the report. So this is a report, worker misclassification and wage theft in the construction industry in Missouri, specifically a report that was concluded in March of 23. On the 5th page specifically, it talks about the data of crimes committed in relation to the missed revenues, Missouri income tax shortfall of between $9 and $45 million because of victimization of undocumented workers. The reality of wage theft and its crime equates to literal government shortfalls from the state. Missouri Unemployment Insurance Program had a shortfall of $16.7 million and $27 million in the construction industry alone in 2020. As it relates to the worker that Ralph had brought up, his name was Jose Rodolfo Garcia Sanchez from Nicaragua. At 1:30 a.m., he fell to his death 14 floors on a state-funded project. You all, state tax credit. You want to know who went to jail for that? What crime was committed? 0. None. No crime committed. Individual fell to his death. Unfortunately, in 2022, 108 other workplace deaths occurred. Unfortunately, there are only 4 investigators for the Wage and Hour Division for the Department of Labor. The reality from the state to go investigate these crimes doesn't exist. Those people are overworked, underpaid, understaffed, undersupported. That's a good place to start. Your data is right here. So, what else to say about this stuff? Employment accountability. You have a debarment list for which you can debar contractors. You want to know how many you've debarred? 0. That's in the existence of ever. 0. You've debarred 0 contractors for violating immigration law, or just law, period. So, those are places to start. A couple important notes I think that are critical. USCIS is the largest employer in the city of Lee Summit. That is something that I think you all should be aware of as you drive up immigration challenges. The reality here, the crimes that you're chasing are far fewer than you planned her out to be. You want to focus on crime, let's talk about preemption of gun laws that I'm able to create, the elimination of bullet laws that I'm able to create in the locality. The reality of immigrants creating these crimes is a falsity you're chasing, asking me for data that you don't have for the existence of your very committee. So it's asinine. Where else? Let's see. Stop sending police to target people like me.
If you would please, yeah, we're at 4 minutes now.
Oh, perfect. I'll stop and yield for questions.
Is there a chance that we could get a copy of the report that you have?
I believe that I gave, 15 copies. Sorry, I didn't want to kill too many trees. I think you guys could share.
I appreciate that. Thank you for bringing it. Questions for the witness? Representative Hovis.
Thank you for your testimony, sir. I appreciate the stats that you've given out to us. A couple others, I think you said you're on the council here for Kansas City.
County legislator.
County legislator. Does the county have their own enforcement groups that work on these type of things you spoke about, such as labor laws or, I guess, permits people to do jobs?
Yes, in fact, we have a debarment list. We introduced the responsible bidder ordinances that my colleague Ralph had suggested. I would suggest that to the state as well. It allows for us not to pick the lowest bidder, which actually incentivizes people to cheat, and allows us as the county to pick the best value bidders, which would include things like making sure that undocumented workers are not working on those sites.
Very good. How many groups have you found in your area of where you represent that have violated these laws that you're talking to us about?
I can tell you that the organization that I actually work for, the Fair Contracting Alliance, has prosecuted 52 individual companies for violations of wage theft in the last year.
I'm sorry, what was the name of that organization?
Fair Contracting Alliance. It focuses on making sure people get paid what they deserve under the prevailing wage laws of the state.
Is that a Kansas City group, or is that a national group? Who is that?
It's actually a national affiliated group. We have a local chapter in Missouri, and that's where the focus is right now, is Kansas City. I'd be happy to take it to any community you'd like me to take it to.
Yeah, so maybe we got around that question. So for the area that you represent as a legislator, as a elected official, how many has your county or city found, and how many of them have they discontinued from doing these projects for your area?
I believe the city of Kansas City has barred 4 contractors so far. The 52 lawsuits kind of come down to very few general contractors who are allowing it to occur both as a general level as well as subcontractor level.
The only reason I bring those points up is because it's easy to point fingers there by state, federal, and local. And I don't think that any of the things that you spoke about is condoned by any member of this committee here as far as hiring people that do things wrongly. So I would say the same thing here. Just, we'll try to do the best that we can. I hope that you guys do the same thing, and I appreciate your testimony today.
Thank you.
Questions for the witness? Seeing none, you've been very patient, and I appreciate you waiting this time. Not everybody got a copy of that document. We will get it emailed out to everyone just to be sure you all have it. Next, Sheridan Jones. Good afternoon. Thank you for your patience. We really appreciate it. If you would say your name, make sure you fill out a witness form. You have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Good afternoon. My name is Sheridan Jones, and I'll make it brief. I am a 54-year-old grandmother, mother of 2, who served in the military, who is a daughter of immigrants, who came to this country on student visas, who worked hard. My dad had afterward, built his own contracting company. And when I say this country, I mean the island of St. Croix, which is still part of this country. And a fun fact that I always like to tell people is that when we use the word immigrant, we need to be mindful how we use it. Are we saying immigrant and we're talking south of the border, Hispanics? Or are we saying immigrants? Are we talking Jamaicans, St. Lucians, Antiguans? Because one of our founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton, was an immigrant, okay? And he lived on the island of St. Croix for some time. So we must be mindful when we say immigrant. And I know that it's been said that the name of this hearing, needs to be changed. And I think it does, because we're talking about how immigrants, and crime in Missouri, how it's causing a problem. But are we talking about immigrants, or are we talking about a problem that we're having south of the border with maybe the Hispanic population that are bringing in drugs, and that, that's just a small, area of it. We have other countries, of immigrants that, yes, cause crimes too. I lived in Brooklyn, very high Russian population, Italian population. So, we have to be very careful when we're throwing that name immigrant around and know what we're talking about, because when we write a bill and we say that we're targeting a certain population, but then we're saying immigrant is a whole slew of people. Because I am a result of an immigrant, and I think that as some of the other people who spoke that also, products of immigrant, we're doing very well. We're not problems. I served 9 years in the military, and that's a lot of, that a lot of people can't say. My children are not problems. And I'm gonna, as long as I have breath in my body, my grandchildren will not be a problem. So, I have 13 siblings. They're not a problem. So we got to be careful when we say immigrants, because it hurts me to hear that we're putting everybody in a bubble and we don't need to be in that bubble. If there's a problem, yes, fentanyl is a problem, but guess what? I didn't bring it into this country. Find out where the problem is. Maybe there needs to be more education in that town about, what's going on. Maybe there needs to be more education in your cities or in your schools, but don't blame a certain class of people for what's going on. They're not the problem. America, we are the problem. We're broken. We need representatives, fix it. Okay? I'm putting it on your shoulders. I need you to fix it. I need you to fix it for my grandchildren.
So your time has expired. Let me just tell you that's why we're here. Although some people would have characterized this a little bit differently, I can speak only for myself, and my purpose in being here is to try to understand it so that we can fix it, if in fact it needs to be fixed. You make a good point about being too free with the phrase immigrant. I agree. Thank you for your service, by the way. I spent a number of years out in the Pacific Northwest where immigrants there and crime related to it are Vietnamese, somewhat different. So you are correct in that. But please understand that we are here in the hopes that at some point we can actually solve the problem. Representative Ely, then Representative Taylor.
Ms. Sheridan, I want to thank you for coming out here. I really appreciate it. I've known you for a while now, and I do. You hail from Brooklyn. You've seen a lot in your life. I'll keep my comments quick. I think you answered the question about how you personally felt or how your community feels about the rhetoric going around with the immigration talk. I do think it's important for us to have data if we're going to talk about this issue of legal immigration. And I am with the chair on trying to figure out how we can solve this problem, but data is important. And hearing what we think we heard or what we heard from somebody else is, doesn't matter. And so I want to, again, thank you for coming out here.
Thank you for coming and joining us, Ms. Jones. Early on, when I was appointed to this committee, I asked the speaker why me, for my own selfish reasons, and he honestly spoke and said that, Dell, it is an election year, and as he's going door to door, he's hearing different things. He's hearing different things, so he launched this committee, and we have been taking testimony. So I personally want to thank you to bringing some light and some truth that when we're talking about immigrants, we're talking about people that are coming from all of our borders, New York, airports, Florida. And all of our immigrants are not brown people from Mexico that come from all over. And you personally have come and you've participated in military service. So I'm going to ask you if you could just share a little bit more about what inspired you and what did you do in the military, and did that contribute to your citizenship?
Well, I'm a born American. And when I joined the military, I joined because I wanted to. I was ROTC in high school. I was gung-ho. Myself and 3 of my siblings were in the military. I also have a great uncle that served in World War I. So my family has been here since the 1920s. It's not to say, oh, I love this country. I was born in this country, and one of the things that and I know this has nothing to do with crime, but a lot of times when I'm talking to people in the Kansas City area and they mention, you know, how immigrants are doing this and immigrants are doing that, and I've said to them, why is it that it's okay to bring immigrants into play sports, Sporting KC, the Currents, the Royals, Joshua Williams, the Chiefs, he's from St. Kitts. That's where my father's from. You know, it's okay, you know, for immigrants to do that. But then, and I rest my case. I know no one that's, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not even going to spare you, but just that's something to think about.
And I appreciate it. I think it is important that we share this narrative and get it out, get the truth out there that immigrants contribute greatly to our country. In fact, some would say that if you're not a Native American, then we're all immigrants.
Exactly.
So I wanted to thank you for that. And again, thank you for your military service. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Seeing none, thank you very much. I appreciate your patience. Okay, so it's been a long day for most of you, and some of you have a long trip home yet. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, we are adjourned.